Chapter 379. Tai coughed loudly while sprawled on the bed, but his fingers were still firmly gripping the little girl's wrist. When Mo Lien entered with her hands behind her back, she just so happened to see this scene. She was immediately enraged, and a slender jet-black longsword emitting a jet-black luster abruptly landed in her palm. Leaving no room for objection, she slashed at the youth Assie's left arm. ACI wasn't stupid, so he naturally dodged when he saw the sword glint and rolled inside the bed. As a result, that unhindered sword aura split the entire bed open with a clang. ACI rolled from the inside to the middle and fell into the crack in the bed. He clutched his chest and coughed for a long time, but he still couldn't crawl out. Mo Lien narrowed her phoenix eyes, and a cold glint flashed past the slender jet-black sword in her hand. She was about to slash at the youth again when Arbor grabbed her arm. Haha. The youth ACI poked half his body out from under the cracked bed and cocked his head at Mo Lien smugly with a nasty expression that said, "Look, the little girl won't let you kill me. Why are you protecting him?" Mo Lien turned to look at Arbor, her expression unreadable. In that instant, the little stoic seemed to sense the youth Mo Lien's rage. She glanced at him in bewilderment before expressionlessly saying, "I still have a newly refined poison that I need him to try. It won't be too late to kill him after he's done." Cough cough. ACI crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. When he heard the little stoic's emotionless words, a trace of fury flashed through his eyes. "Bastard woman." Cough cough cough. Mo Lien smiled faintly without batting an eyelid. She put away that slender jet-black sword and turned around while holding the little girl's small hand. "Wait a minute." Arbor pulled back his small hand and tore off a piece of his sleeve. He threw it on the ground and stomped on it. Behind the two of them, the wolf-like eye stared fixedly at the girl's back. If his gaze could penetrate her back, there would probably be more than one hole in Xiao Mu's body right now. Mo Lien's dark phoenix eyes shone even brighter. She happily held the little girl's hand again and smiled. "Why did you tear it off?" "It's dirty." Mo Lien looked back indifferently, her gaze coldly disdainful at Yasi. Her thin lips parted slightly as she silently muttered, "Don't even think about what's not yours." Yas glared back, but the other party had already retracted his gaze in disdain and left the room while holding the little girl's hand. Cough cough. Cough cough. A strange pain assaulted him from his chest. Yas took a deep breath and bent down, his gaze fiercely landing on the sleeve that the little girl had stepped on. That sleeve was plain-colored, and after being stepped on, there was an extremely small shoe print on it. Yasi suddenly pounced over like an angry tiger. He clutched the pain in his chest and coughed loudly. He struggled to crawl a few steps on the ground and tightly grasped that piece of cloth in his hand. The cloth peeked out from between his fingers, and a small piece was tightly clenched in his palm. When Mo Lien and Arbor walked out hand in hand, they happened to see Wei Nanfeng winking at them with a smile. The young couple rolled their eyes at him in unison and ignored him as they strolled past him. Wei Nanfeng, "I originally came here to watch a good show. I'm not angry." The two of them had just walked to the main hall when they saw City Lord Luge hurrying over to request an audience with Murong Sun. "Aikido's clan leader has arrived. He brought 2,000 able-bodied men from the tribe and the entire Eagle Battle Squad. They're waiting outside the city gates." Chapter 380. Murong Sun raised her brows. "Leave him be. Let him do as he pleases. Let's see if he dares to directly attack the city." "More people? Who are you trying to scare with more people?" City Lord Luge wiped the sweat from his forehead and hastily carried out the order. The next day, ACI was brought to the little stoic on his last breath. Although he was so exhausted that he was practically limp and unable to move, his pitch-black wolf-like eyes still emitted an untamed glint. "Why?" ACI couldn't help but question the little girl as he looked at her icy profile. The little girl was no more than 12 or 13 years old. Her little face was as cold as snow. From his angle, he could see that she was holding a bottle of transparent liquid and gently shaking it. Her brows were slightly furrowed. "Why?" ACI roared angrily before the guard next to him punched him in the head. "What are you roaring for?" Arbor turned around and coldly stared at the youth in front of him. After the youth's braids unraveled, his half-length hair that reached his neck was disheveled and scattered around his forehead and ears. His wolf-like eyes emitted a ruthless glint through the strands of hair on his forehead. "Why are you treating me like this?" Tai clenched his fists and indignantly questioned. "The weak are prey to the strong in the western wastelands. What do those normal people who died at the city gate have to do with you? Do you have to use a chicken feather as a token of authority to avenge them?" "I'm not that senseless," Arbor coldly said. "Other people's life and death have nothing to do with me." "Then why are you punishing me?" He couldn't figure it out. He also felt that the girl wasn't someone who liked to meddle in other people's business. She didn't care about those normal people who died at the city gate at all. "You were the one who started it." Arbor threw down this sentence and didn't want to explain at all. He handed the medicinal liquid in his hand to the guard next to him. "Give it to him to drink. This is the last time you test the medicine. If you're lucky enough to survive this time, then your life isn't meant to end yet. We'll write off all past debts." After the little stoic icily said this, she turned around and left. I didn't understand the reason, but he felt pain in his heart. 2 guards held him down, and he couldn't stop struggling. His gaze was tightly locked onto her chilly back for a long time. But, do you think you can cut off all ties with me like this? Don't even think about it." Damned girl, come back here. Who the fuck am I to write off my debt with you? Get back here." ACI angrily kicked his legs and glared at the back of the girl's head with a pair of fiendish eyes. One of the guards was almost unable to hold down the struggling youth. 2 more guards ran over from the side and hurriedly forced him to kneel on the ground. 4 of their hands desperately pressed down on his hands and poured medicine into his mouth. Yas choked on the medicinal liquid in his mouth and coughed loudly. Wei Nanfeng walked over and lightly laughed. "I say, why are you like a stupid bear, so silly and naive?" Wei Nanfeng dragged a stool to sit in front of ACI and said with a chuckle, "When you ran over with a troop of war eagles to throw pointed bamboo at Peak Master Murong and the others, you were already destined to be enemies with the little stoic. Do you still not understand?" ACI roared angrily and suddenly pounced forward, as if he wanted to directly bite Wei Nanfeng's throat. "What?" Wei Nanfeng jumped up and hastily kicked away the stool to evade. He commanded the guards, "Hold him down, hold him down. He really is a mad dog, biting everyone he sees." Chapter 381. 4 to 5 bodyguards swarmed forward and pressed ACI to the ground again. However, they didn't need to do anything else. The poison in Assie's body had already flared up, and he was powerless to resist. The youth curled up on the ground, his limbs shivering and twitching nonstop. A layer of frost covered his hair, eyebrows, and even lips. "Watch him." Wei Nanfeng quickly ran out and stood under the scorching sun before his entire body couldn't help but shudder. He didn't know what kind of poison the little stoic used on him, but the poison flared up so quickly that even ACI, who was as strong as a bull, was instantly knocked to the ground. He turned to look and saw the little girl sitting under a tree with a thick book on her knees. She was currently reading with her head lowered. Her lowered eyes were peaceful and serene. How could anyone tell that she was the vicious little girl from earlier? A brown square wooden box was placed on the short table in front of her, and steam was rising from 3 cups of tea next to it. The 3 peak masters drank tea and chatted, occasionally glancing at the little girl flipping through the book. "Disciple, this book was sent over by the city lord just now?" Murong Sun raised her brows. Her disciple's speed at flipping through the book was a bit too frightening. Her eyes didn't linger on the page for more than 3 seconds before she turned the page. What the hell could she see from flipping through the book like this? Yes. Arbor nodded. Just as she finished flipping through the book, Mo Lien walked over. Ignoring Peak Master Murong's piercing glare, Mo Lien pulled the little girl up. He glanced at the book on the corner of the short table and slightly raised his slender brows. "Jojo, let's go. A batch of the ebony you wanted is here." "So fast?" The little fellow's eyes brightened. "Come back soon. We're about to start eating, so don't talk for too long." Peak Master Murong quickly shouted. Lien lightly harumphed and hooked the little fellow's soft fingers, directly dragging her away. Your master is really annoying. Halfway there, the youth leaned close to the little girl's ear and whispered. Arbor turned around and glared at him, but the youth chuckled in return. Jojo, did you finish reading the medical book the city lord gave you? Yes, I have. The little girl replied unhappily. She didn't know why, but when she flipped through the pages, she felt that the book was extremely familiar. The content of the book was very basic, as if she had flipped through it countless times, and it was entangled in her heart after countless twists and turns. She really wanted to know how many medical books and poison collections she had read. Did she really read all the medical books and performed acupuncture no less than 1,000,000 times? Otherwise, why would she be able to concoct the clear radish pill and even refine the clear radish poison just by looking at the clear radish flower? What was given to ACI was none other than the most potent poison of the Viridian vine. Compared to the 9th grade Een poison pill that the princess had tried to feed him, the toxicity of the Een poison pill was worlds apart. I remember that the Imperial Physician Building has quite a number of such books. I'll get someone to sort them out and send them to you in 2 days. Arbor nodded repeatedly. She only needed to borrow it for a while before returning it. Jojo, come and take a look. Is this ebony cut into this size suitable? If not, I'll get someone to make a new one. The Crown Prince picked up a small piece of ebony and placed it in the little girl's hand, looking at it with a smile. It's pretty good. Arbor touched the ebony piece in her hand and nodded. At the same time, far away in Guanlon City, the old Imperial physician in charge of the Imperial Physician Building suddenly sneezed while holding a medical book. He hurriedly got up and closed the door to the Imperial Physician Building, then turned around and picked up the medical book like it was a treasure. He used his sleeve to wipe off some dust on the book. Chapter 382. Arbor stored the ebony into her only purple storage talisman, thinking that she had to draw some talismans tonight. This purple talisman had 4 cubic meters of space and could be used 400 times. Even without the paradise, it was enough for her for the time being. The previous batch of low-level talismans had been sent to the Crown Prince to be auctioned at Morning Sunlight Pavilion, so she really didn't have many talismans that could be of use to her now. She planned to draw some intermediate-level talismans to replenish her talisman reserves in case she needed them in the future. That night, Arbor toiled by candlelight and drew 100 intermediate-level blue storage talismans. 6 cubic meters of any storage space could be used 200 times each. Living things still couldn't be used. Afterwards, she drew quite a few intermediate-level auxiliary talismans, including speed, strength, immobilization, dizziness, drowsiness, wall crossing, repeat talismans, and so on. She drew more than a dozen of each and stored them properly. When she looked up, half the night had already passed. She had drawn a total of 200 talismans, which was quite a harvest. Her talisman drawing speed also increased slightly. Arbor sat at the table and took out 2 pieces of ebony to ponder. She thought, I wonder if this talisman brush can also leave a mark on ebony. Her talisman brush was a bit magical. Normal talisman practitioners needed a cinnabar talisman brush to draw talismans, but she only needed 1 talisman brush to draw talismans. However, this ebony wasn't as soft as talisman paper. She just didn't know to just as she was thinking, the small golden bead at the tip of the cinnabar brush suddenly lit up. Arbor's small hand tilted slightly and immediately drew a light gray mark on a piece of ebony. She quickly reached out to touch that talisman brush. When she touched the brush tip, she couldn't help but be startled. The originally soft brush hairs had all gathered together at some point, and the brush felt a bit sharp to the touch. This was truly amazing. This talisman brush was originally snatched from her apparition. Could it be? This thing was also a gift from the golden talisman jade tome? When she thought of this, the little stoic's mouth twitched unconsciously, and she found it a bit funny in her heart. She tried to continue drawing on that piece of wood she had drawn on, and a few minutes later, she completed an intermediate-level blue summoning talisman. She stared at that intermediate-level blue summoning talisman drawn on ebony, and her eyes suddenly brightened. The talisman power doubled again. The level of talisman power directly affected the duration of the talisman. Back then, the blue summoning talisman drawn on talisman paper could be used for 6 days. Now, this talisman drawn on ebony could be used for 12 days. Although the Qing wand she summoned disregarded the rules of time from the very beginning, there was no guarantee that if this summoning talisman was given to someone else, it would follow the rules of time. That's right, I can let the Crown Prince try it out tomorrow. She hurriedly drew 2 more storage talismans. Not long after, a blue light flashed, and 2 intermediate-level blue storage talismans were completed. 12 cubic meters of storage space can be accessed 400 times each. How amazing! The fine-grade blue talisman drawn with ebony was much more spacious and easier to access than the peerless grade purple talisman she had drawn with talisman paper. She still had a lot of ebony and could draw another Xian gathering glyph array. The little girl was overjoyed. After blowing out the lamp and resting, she lay on the bed and hugged the newly drawn ebony talisman. She tossed and turned happily for a while before falling asleep in a daze. Early the next morning, when she saw Emolienne in front of the dining hall, the little girl ran over in high spirits. She tugged at Emolienne's hand and said, "Come with me." Affected by the little girl's happy mood, Emolienne followed her to the open courtyard with a smile and casually teased, "What is it, Jojo? You missed me this much after not seeing me for one night?" Chapter 383. Wei Nanfeng, Bailey Shi, Princess Mi, and the others just happened to follow over and were caught off guard by the Crown Prince's display of affection. Their hearts were truly stifled. Arbor looked up at him, staring at him with large, beady eyes for a long while before stuffing him with an ebony talisman and saying in a crisp voice, "Try it." The Crown Prince lowered his head to take a look. The ebony talisman script was intricately intertwined. Only an expert would be able to understand it. "Try opening the talisman." Seeing that he didn't respond for a long time, Arbor impatiently pulled his 5 fingers over and lowered his head to nibble on his index finger, squeezing a drop of blood onto the blue summoning talisman. The Crown Prince was immediately stupefied on the spot. His entire person had completely turned into a wooden stick, stupefied as he stood there motionlessly. He only felt the little fellow's lips and teeth landing between his fingers. It felt limp and numb, sending ripples through his heart. The originally tranquil lake water in his heart seemed to boil as it surged violently. "Oh my miss, you flirted Crown Prince Lien silly." Wei Nanfeng pursed his lips as he stood on the side. Suddenly, a roar sounded in his ears. When a snow leopard with a pure white body, 4 hooves stepping on snow, and all of its fur standing on end abruptly landed in front of everyone, stomping down several nearby low shrubs, everyone present gaped as they stared dumbfoundedly at the big fellow in front of them. This? Who is this? What did he summon a mystic beast for? Emolienne didn't regain her senses until she heard the snow leopard's roar. She looked up and saw a snow leopard with a robust figure looking at her. It gracefully walked to her side and half-crouched next to her slender legs. Arbor's round eyes stared fixedly at that snow leopard, completely unable to tear her gaze away. But why was it that she always screwed up when she tried to summon and couldn't summon such a mighty snow leopard? How could the Crown Prince summon such a charming leopard on his first try? The little stoic ran in front of the snow leopard and extended a small hand, rubbing the snow leopard's large, furry head with an infatuated expression. Afterwards, she actually flipped over and climbed onto the snow leopard's back. The snow leopard turned its head and casually glanced at her. Then, it retracted its gaze and continued to lie quietly beside Emolienne's legs. Wei Nanfeng's eyes almost popped out. "Lien, what are you doing? Where did you get this snow leopard? Is it your mystical beast?" Bailey Shi crossed his arms and softly scolded, "Idiot." Without waiting for Wei Nanfeng to turn around to glare at him, he coldly said, "Didn't you see the summoning talisman in his hand?" Summoning talisman? It was as if Wei Nanfeng had heard some legend. He opened his eyes wide and ran forward, wanting to take the wooden piece from the Crown Prince's hand. The Crown Prince retracted his hand, avoiding his grasp, and glared at him. "Stingy." Wei Nanfeng mumbled, I already know that after this talisman is activated, this talisman is useless to others. I just want to take a look. The Crown Prince didn't even want to let Wei Nanfeng take a look and directly put the ebony talisman into his clothes. He turned around to rub the little girl's head with a grin and led her down from the snow leopard. You must be hungry. Go eat breakfast first. Arbor turned around to glance at the large snow leopard, then turned around and stuffed another intermediate-level blue storage talisman inscribed with ebony into the Crown Prince's hand. This storage talisman has more space and access times than the one I gave you before. In the future, use this storage talisman. Wei Nanfeng suddenly exclaimed, You're a talisman practitioner. On the side, Bailey she glanced at him irritably. Didn't he already know that the little girl was a talisman practitioner the first time he met her? Chapter 384. Was there a need to make such a big fuss over nothing? Bailey she swept a glance at Wei Nanfeng. Heavens! He was actually disliked by a talisman master. Wei Nanfeng only felt a dark cloud hovering above his head, and his chest felt so stifled. A 12 to 13-year-old talisman master could draw the legendary summoning talisman? What kind of standard was this? This was definitely a great talisman master in the midst of maturing, the kind with limitless prospects. However, he fell out with her on the first day. Wei Nanfeng had a mournful face as he followed beside Bailey she dejectedly. He said in a low voice, I thought that the talisman array she used when she leapt into the air to fight with you that day was just me seeing things. No matter how I thought about it later, I felt that it was impossible for a 12 to 13-year-old little girl to be able to draw talisman matrices in this world. Deceiving himself like this, he brushed this matter aside and didn't think about it anymore. Thinking about it now, he couldn't help but feel that he was a bit laughable. Princess Mi also recovered her wits and said with an incredulous expression, I've only heard of that family in Guanlan City, the only talisman patrician family on our Seakong planet. The number of big and small talisman masters is only a total of 100 people. Among them, there are also many who are over 60 years old. TSK, this younger sister of mine is incredible. She's already a talisman master at such a young age. Wei Nanfeng turned his head around and looked at Princess Mi resentfully. He felt that anything he said now was like using a knife to stab his heart. What are you looking at me for? I also can't help you ease your relationship with the younger sister. Princess Mi harumphed, then smiled as she pulled on Bailey Shi's arm and called out gently, Big brother Shi, let's go eat breakfast now. Bailey Shi's arm shook lightly and brushed away her approaching fingers. Then he leaped onto a tree, and after a few leaps, his figure was nowhere to be seen. Wei Nanfeng speechlessly glanced over there, then turned to look at Princess Mi who was about to flip out, and hurriedly waved his claws and swiftly slipped away. Princess Mi was still about to say the word go when she saw that Bailey Shi had disappeared without a trace. She was so angry that she stomped her feet and chased after him, shouting, Bailey Shi, come back here. When Mo Lien and Arbor walked over hand in hand, the person who attracted the attention of the Holy Water Sect's senior sisters was not the two of them but the large snow leopard following behind them. The snow leopard's eyes were jet black, and its fur was glossy and shiny. As soon as it followed the two in, it immediately took up most of the space in the dining hall. Everyone suddenly felt that the space had become much narrower. Many pairs of curious eyes fell on the snow leopard. Junior sister, is this a side dish? Chang Yushi's words made many of the senior and junior sisters spit out their food. The brains of the people from the second peak were indeed different. Who would eat such a big snow leopard? Weren't you afraid that you would become a side dish in the snow leopard's mouth? When Murong Sun, Yang Shirong, and Lu Yun entered, they saw this scene. The group of disciples stopped eating and all gathered around the snow leopard to watch. The snow leopard was a bit impatient from being surrounded by the senior sisters. It wanted to roar, but when it caught the crown prince's indifferent glance, it instantly stifled its roar. What were a bunch of bumpkins looking at when they surrounded it? Is there really such a miraculous item like summoning talismans? Chen Hanzi whispered. If it's as junior sister said, then if we can summon mystic beasts in the future, then wouldn't that Break the rule that mystic cultivators can only have one contracted beast? When Xue Xiao thought of this, her eyes brightened. Chapter 385. Arbor nodded. That should be the case. Little junior sister, please give us a summoning talisman. Please give us a summoning talisman. All the senior sisters said in unison, eagerly requesting talismans. After breakfast, I'll draw one for each of you. Okay. All the senior sisters' cheers nearly broke through the roof. I also want one. I also want one. Princess Mi, who couldn't fit into the crowd, was pushed to the back by everyone and kept jumping up and down while raising her hand. Arbor didn't decline since it was as easy as lifting a finger. All right, aren't you going to eat after asking for talismans? Come over if you're done. Yang Shirong shook her head with a smile and called out to the disciples. Everyone was eager to request talismans and didn't have the mood to eat breakfast. They hastily finished their breakfast and looked impatiently at their little stoic junior sister. Arbor took out 30 pieces of ebony and a gold-beaded talisman pen, quickly drawing talismans. Everyone didn't dare to disturb her and only gathered far away to watch her work without blinking. However, they felt that their little junior sister's talisman drawing speed was quite fast. From what they knew, no matter how talented a talisman practitioner was in that family in Guanlon City, it was impossible for them to draw talismans so quickly. Their little junior sister was truly an extraordinary little genius. After less than an hour, Arbor distributed the summoning talismans to all the senior sisters and Princess Mi, who came up to ask for a talisman. Everyone held the ebony talismans in their hands and felt that the talisman scripts drawn on the ebony pieces were exquisite and profound. They flipped through them lovingly while carefully listening to their little junior sister's words. The summoning talisman's time limit was 12 days. This was truly beyond everyone's expectations. From what they knew, that family's residents in Guanlon City had an intermediate-level summoning talisman that could summon for 6 days. Everyone was chatting enthusiastically and abnormally lively when City Lord Luge hastily walked in with his people. Peak Master, Peak Master. Luge hastily bowed to everyone and said with a chuckle, Aikido's clan leader sent someone to deliver a letter requesting for peace, requesting us to release his third son. He's also willing to pay compensation in exchange for the lives of his clansmen. Let's go take a look. Murong Sun waved her hand, and everyone brought out the Aikido people from the woodshed and escorted them to the city gate tower. Where's our young master? Where's our young master? The Aikido people roared hoarsely. What are you being so long-winded for? Let's go. The crowd angrily dragged the dozen or so Aikido people up the city wall. At the same time, Xiao Mu walked into the room where the youth, ACI, was imprisoned. She creased her brows as she looked at the youth who was lying on the bed in a sorry state, but his pair of wolf-like eyes were still fixated on her. To be able to survive such a strong poison from a small bottle, there must be something strange about this young man's body. You can't kill me. I am the eagle of the wilderness. I am the destined future overlord of the West. Cough, cough, cough. His lips were dry and his throat was extremely dry. It was difficult for him to speak, but his sharp gaze followed the little girl's movements. I'll chop off your head and see how you continue to boast. Emolien sneered. Yas glared at Emolien. You're not a hero of the wilderness if you're afraid of death. Hold him down. Arbor didn't waste words and directly ordered several guards to hold Yas down on the shabby bed. He took out a silver needle and pricked one of his fingers. He carefully examined his blood. Move him to the city gate tower. Arbor turned around and left after saying this. Chapter 386. The cold poison in his blood is gradually weakening, as if he has a natural antitoxin. Arbor pursed her lips. Perhaps his identity isn't that simple. Emolien raised her brows slightly. She thought of something, and her gaze darkened. When the two of them reached the city gate tower, they saw that half of the sky was occupied by the Eagle battle team. Below the city gate, more than 2,000 Aikido tribesmen were shouting and cursing at the city lord and the others. Arbor had people lift ACI up and push him onto the city wall. A sharp dagger instantly appeared in her hand, and she held it against Assie's neck. Aikido tribe's clan leader Ahan stared at them with sharp eagle eyes and shouted, "What do you want to do? Our Aikido has already yielded so much and even handed over a letter of peace. Hurry up and release my son." "What's the use of a letter of peace?" Murong Sun coldly said, "This peak master heard that you Western Wastelands people value oaths the most. How about this? You write an oath right now, stamp it with your and your entire tribe's blood seal, and hand it over. This way, even if you want to go back on your word in the future, the law of heaven will punish you on our behalf. Dream on." All of the able-bodied men in the Aikido tribe started to clamor. Without another word, Arbor threw half of Assie's body over the city wall and looked like she was going to push ACI down the city gate tower. This shocked the clamor below into abruptly stopping. Ahan's voice trembled, and he uncontrollably clenched his fists. He shouted sternly, "Little miss, please have mercy. I advise you to think clearly before acting. Assie's identity isn't someone you can afford to provoke. If anything happens to him, the entire Shuwang City and the entire Western Wastelands won't be able to compensate for his honorable life." So much nonsense. Arbor forcefully pushed, and ACI plummeted down with an ashen face. Only one long leg was left dangling inside the city wall. His entire body was basically in a plummeting state, and his appearance was quite unique. We agree, we agree. We agree to anything. Where did this vicious little miss come from? She didn't leave any leeway for others to consider. Ahan's eyes were bloodshot, but there was nothing he could do. Yas was Aikido's weak spot. He definitely couldn't let anything happen to Yas. No one could bear the consequences. When the oath was handed up to the city tower, City Lord Lu Gu received it with both hands. He was so excited that he could not control himself. Great, the oath was effective. Just as Peak Master Murong had said, if the Aikido tribe members dared to go back on their words, they would be the first to receive the punishment of the heavens. None of them would be able to escape. Many thanks to Peak Master Murong. Many thanks to everyone for your help. The city lord was almost crying tears of joy. From now on, their Shuwang City's days should be better. Murong Sun waved her hand and had people escort ACI and his group out of the city. While the young ACI was being dragged away, his wolfish eyes were still glaring fiercely at Arbor, as if he wanted to imprint her small appearance in the depths of his eyes and engrave it in his mind. "Just you wait. Damn girl. I will come back for you. Just you wait." The young man yelled fiercely. Everyone glared at him. However, the little stoic was bewildered. Who has the patience to wait for him? Wei Nanfeng broke into laughter as he looked at the displeased Emolian. Wei Nanfeng winked at him and quietly teased, "Looks like your little miss hasn't been enlightened yet. Your road, TSK, is still very long." Chapter 387. Emolian didn't say anything and just coldly watched Assie's back as he was dragged away. Yasi was finally carried away by the Aikido tribesmen. Even at the foot of the city gate tower, that pair of malicious eyes were still directed toward the top of the city gate tower. What an annoying guy. Don't let him see him again. Murong Sun smiled and held her youngest disciple's hand. We've pretty much settled everything, and it's enough to rest for so many days. Let's enter Shisha Valley this afternoon. Shisha Valley was adjacent to Shuwang City. Outside of Shuwang City was its territory and bordered the southwest, but it didn't belong to the jurisdiction of anyone in the southwest. Its status was rather aloof. Shisha Valley and Celestial Medicine Valley were equally famous, commonly known as the Two Valleys. Both of them were praised by the common people for standing aloof from worldly affairs, and their reputations were extremely good. The competition this time involved the 3 sects and 5 factions, so it was naturally best to hold it in a neutral land like Shisha Valley. Murong Sun's group left Shuwang City under the respectful escort of City Lord Luge and the others. An hour later, they arrived at Shisha Valley's mountain gate. Shisha Valley was enveloped within an expanse of luxuriant flowers and green trees. The entire valley was in the shape of a gourd. The mouth of the valley was narrow, but it was said that the interior of the valley was a completely different world. The environment was extremely beautiful. There were a total of 12 disciples guarding the mountain gate. They were very refined and courteous in their treatment of people. It could be seen that Xixia Valley's upbringing was extremely good. When the two chief disciples saw Murong Sun and her group arrive, they hastily went up to greet them and cupped their hands in greeting. "Greetings, fellow cultivators," Murong Sun said with a smile. "We come from the Holy Water sect." Murong Sun. So it is Peak Master Murong who has graced us with his presence. We did not know and have neglected you. Please forgive us. The two head disciples of Xixia Valley hurriedly bowed again. Everyone is too polite. Purple Firmament Gate's eldest disciple, Bailey Shi. Heavenly Dao Sect's second disciple, Wei Nanfeng. The two princes reported their sect's identity and cupped their fists in greeting towards the disciples of Xixia Valley. Please invite them in. The people from the two sects have already arrived yesterday. Everyone please follow us. When they entered the valley, they saw a gurgling stream, green trees, and all kinds of precious flower species planted on both sides of the path. The fragrance of the flowers assaulted their nostrils. Xixia Valley is indeed a paradise. The scenery is delightful. Everyone praised. When they passed by a 9-ringed corridor carved out of white jade, they came face to face with two people. They were dressed in gray robes that covered their entire bodies, making them look like lepers. Those two are friends from Ghost Faction. The Xixia Valley disciple raised his hand and introduced them, nodding in greeting at the two Ghost Faction disciples. Those who walked different paths could not make plans together. Among the 5 factions, only the Purple Firmament faction was worth befriending. The other 4 factions were truly unsightly. The Holy Water Sect disciples were naturally unwilling to interact with the demons and monsters of the Ghost Faction, so they immediately followed Murong Sun and filed past the two Ghost Faction disciples without another word, not even bothering to greet them. The two Hellgate disciples raised their heads slightly. The one on the left had a petite figure and looked like a woman. Her gaze instantly fell on Emolian. To be precise, that piercing gaze was fixed on the little stoic beside Emolian. Arbor was currently raising his small head and whispering to Emolian beside him. When everyone walked past the two Ghost Faction disciples, nothing happened. It was only when the little stoic passed by that young girl from the Ghost Faction instantly attacked. Her 5 faintly black fingers caught Arbor off guard and clawed at his small face. If she was caught red-handed, the little girl's fair and frosty face would probably be ruined. Chapter 388. Inside the main hall of the Aikido tribe. The youth I was carried and placed on a thick tiger skin felt, his malicious gaze fixed on the row of people kneeling below. This old servant failed to protect his master. Please punish me, young master. Ahan knelt on one knee in front of the youth with his head lowered. Father. Aci hurriedly got up, but he was somewhat weak. What are you doing? Are you all dead? Why aren't you helping my father up? I've already said that no matter what, you're the father who raised me. There's no need to be so courteous. Ahan stood up, and a touched glimmer flashed through his eyes. He nodded and said, Issei, I've already examined your body. I've already asked the doctor to check your body, and there's nothing wrong with you. Although you were poisoned when you left earlier, Master had already planted a poison-repelling fruit in your body, which can protect you from the corrosion of hundreds of poisons. However, that girl is vicious, and the poison she used on you is unusual. Even if you have a poison-repelling fruit in your body that can neutralize a lot of the poison, there's still a small amount of residual poison that can't be completely eliminated in a short period of time. Ahan sternly said, during this period of time, don't run out again. Stay in the tribe and properly recuperate from your injuries and completely remove the poison. ACI nodded. A tall and sturdy man suddenly stood up and cupped his hands in a low, muffled voice. Young master, this subordinate requests permission to bring a group of people to infiltrate Shuang City overnight. Even if we can't touch a single finger of the people in the city, this subordinate and the others can secretly eliminate that audacious girl. To repay young master for the humiliation you suffered on the city wall today. Xiai abruptly straightened his body and glowered at the sturdy man. He tightly clenched his back teeth and angrily said, "Don't you dare touch a single strand of her hair." "What did I do wrong?" was written all over the sturdy man's dumbfounded face. This subordinate devoted himself to eliminating an enemy for young master, so why did he provoke young master's anger? "It's best if you don't meddle in this young master's affairs." Ci flew into a rage out of humiliation and threw a cup at them. "Scram, scram, scram. All of you scram." Ahan hastily signaled the two maids on the side with his eyes and hastily called for everyone to withdraw. Two maidservants stepped forward, trembling with fear. They knelt beside Assie's bed and said softly, "Young master, we will help you change your bandages." Tai coldly stared at the two maids and waved his hand for them to come forward. There were countless wounds of various sizes on Yas's body. The bone fracture in his chest had yet to heal, and the various external wounds needed to be regularly changed and reapplied with ointment. One of the maidservants held the ointment in her hand, while the other gently helped him untie the cloth that was wrapped around his wound, dipped it in the ointment, and applied it to his wound. When the ice-cold ointment was applied to his forehead, Assie's eyes suddenly opened wide and emitted a cold light. He abruptly reached out and firmly grasped the maidservant's hand. The maidservant was flustered and blushed. She stole a glance at Yasi and sweetly whispered, "Young master?" "Woman, this young master will definitely conquer you." Se glared at the maidservant with an ominous glint in his eyes. He pushed her onto the bed and viciously tore at her clothes. The other maidservant holding the ointment crawled back a few steps with a red face. She lowered her head and didn't dare to take another look. "Young master, this servant can do it herself. There's no need to trouble young master." The maidservant shyly looked at Assie's handsome face. Just as she was about to undress herself, Ci kicked her to the ground. Chapter 389. The maidservant fell to the ground with a thump and frantically gathered her tattered clothes. She hurriedly crawled back 2 steps and knelt on the ground, not daring to raise her head as her shoulders trembled. "Your status is lowly and despicable. Slut. Simply impudent. You dare to climb onto this young master's bed. You want to seduce this young master's pleasure? Simply indulging in fantasy." Aci strode off the bed with his hands on his hips like an angry lion as he angrily shouted outside, "Where are the Warhawk guards?" "Young master." Outside the door, several armored guards rushed in and stared covetously at the woman who was lying limp on the ground and trembling all over. "Drag her out of here. Behead her in public." Aci roared. "No. Young master. No, don't. Young master. It's not that this maidservant is bold. Just now, young master, it was you who did this maidservant." "No, young master. This maidservant really didn't climb onto the bed on purpose." "Young master, please investigate thoroughly." "Young master, please investigate thoroughly." The maidservant trembled all over as 2 guards grabbed her by the arms and dragged her along the ground. Her legs kept kicking the ground as she screamed. More than half of the tribe was alarmed. The men and women all came out of their tents and looked in surprise at the young maidservant who was dragged out of the young master's tent. Her clothes were messy and tattered, and a few strips of cloth fell loosely on her body. It was very difficult to cover her snow-white skin. The women gathered together and curled their lips in mockery as they coldly looked at the pitiful woman being escorted to be executed. "What an idiot, daring to seduce young master. She deserves to die. Isn't that so? Everyone knows that young master is notoriously picky and hard to serve. She actually deluded herself into thinking of flying to the top. Simply laughable." The moment the head fell, the woman's screams and cries also disappeared. Ci stood in the tent with his hands on his hips, his cold gaze falling on the other maidservant who was kneeling on the ground with her head bowed. She was trembling and didn't dare to say a word. "What's your name?" "Who?" "Guing." Ci coldly stared at the maidservant named Guing. "You also think that this young master is cruel, heartless, and unreasonable?" Guing hurriedly shook her head, but her trembling shoulders had already revealed the deep fear in her heart. "What are you waiting for? Come here and continue applying medicine for me. Xia retracted his cold gaze and turned around to sit on the edge of the bed. Gu Ying hurriedly crawled a few steps forward. Without looking sideways, she stretched out her hand to apply the ointment. Women, the next time we meet, this young master will definitely conquer you. Definitely. Assie's wolfish eyes narrowed slightly as he lowered his head to look at the maidservant who was applying ointment on his chest. That extremely aggressive gaze made Gu Ying's heart tremble slightly. She steadied her wrist with all her might and continued to apply medicine to the youth without losing her patience. My Zhou's section break. I've long heard that Xixia Valley's scenery is extremely beautiful. Now that I've seen it today, it truly lives up to its reputation. Before Murong Sun could finish speaking, she saw that female ghost faction disciple who brushed past them reach out at lightning speed to grab her youngest disciple's face. However, her fingers were suffused with a faint black glow, evidently dipped in poison. How could her youngest disciple's face be fine after this grab? She was simply too audacious. Murong Sun was about to explode. The ghost faction female disciple's sudden grab didn't cause the little stoic to panic in the slightest. She extended her palm even faster than the ghost faction female disciple and circulated some mystic energy around her palm to block the ghost faction female disciple's grab. Chapter 390. Little Junior Sister. Everyone cried out in surprise because they could see that this female disciple's cultivation was not low. At the very least, it was not below their holy water sect disciples. They heard that the ghost faction had a set of crooked cultivation methods that allowed their cultivation speed to be many times faster than normal mystic cultivators. This ghost faction female disciple's fingers were unable to penetrate the mystic energy defense on the back of the little girl's hand and only left a shallow white mark on her left hand. Arbor lowered his head to look at the white mark on his hand. He raised his head with an icy gaze and stared at the ghost faction female disciple as if he was looking at a corpse. The next moment, the ghost faction female disciple's body flew up and was kicked far away by Emolian. She coughed out a mouthful of blood and collapsed on the ground with a dispirited expression. Emolian took Arbor's small hand and examined it carefully. Her fingers lightly caressed that shallow white mark. The ghost faction female disciple was a tough nut to crack. She didn't make a sound or cry out in pain, but she couldn't get up from the ground for a long time after being kicked by Prince Emo. The ghost faction female disciple's eyes peeked out from her long bangs. At this moment, she was staring resentfully at Arbor, who was beside Emolian. To be precise, her gaze was glued to Crown Prince Lien's hand that was holding the little girl's hand. What are you doing? Another ghost faction disciple hastily ran up and tried to pull the female disciple up from the ground. His eyes, which were wrapped in a gray headscarf, stared vigilantly at the Holy Water sect group. Who are you? Making a big fuss here. Are you an idiot? Princess Mi retorted without a second word. You were clearly the ones who made the first move, all right? What do you mean by what are we doing? What can we do? Isn't that so? There's something wrong with your head. Chang Yushi also cursed. The ghost faction disciple's gloomy eyes looked straight at Princess Mi before sweeping over everyone. He felt that he and his junior sister had no chance of winning against so many people, so he resentfully planned to support his junior sister and leave. Who knew that the little stoic would say coldly, "Did I say you could leave?" The male disciple who was supporting the ghost faction female disciple suddenly froze. He stiffened his neck and turned his head around. His malicious eyes locked onto the young lady. What do you want? My junior sister has already been reduced to this state because of you. Are you still not willing to let her go? She only has herself to blame. It has nothing to do with anyone. The little stoic shouted coldly and grabbed the feral with a swish. You want to leave so easily after injuring me? Do you think I eat vegetarian and chant Buddhist scriptures all day long and assist the common people? Me. My junior sister has already suffered. Before the male ghost faction disciple could finish his sentence, he immediately sensed the stoic-faced little girl in front of him brandishing a terrifying mystic energy towards him and his junior sister. Boom! The nearby white jade corridor trembled, and jade fragments fell from the corridor. The little stoic leaped up and arrived in front of the ghost faction disciple with a whoosh. The mystic energy in her entire body surged, and a ferrule fell from the air. A line of fire shot out from the ferrule. This Xian weapon could feel its young master's anger and had already displayed its current peak state. Wei Nanfeng screamed savagery in his heart, but he chuckled as he watched this commotion. Speechless, really speechless. Why did he provoke the little stoic without rhyme or reason? He had finally seen through the little stoic. She was usually easy to deal with, but once you crossed her bottom line, she would absolutely exterminate you directly. Chapter 391. There's no way she's going to waste words and reconcile with you. This little fellow clearly wants to kill you. Junior sister. The ghost faction male disciple's fury burst forth. His fist was imbued with mystic energy, and just as he was about to attack the little girl, he felt as if his fist was blocked by something and was directly pulled backwards by a force. His arm uncontrollably rose backwards, and no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't swing it in front of the girl. Immediately he inwardly cursed. There was an expert secretly protecting the girl and restraining him. The ghost faction male disciple raised his eyes and gazed at the motionless Prince Mo from afar. He only felt that the other youth's gaze was ice-cold and harsh, and his expression was solemn, as if he could completely dismember him into 10,000 pieces in the next second. Since he couldn't win, he could only dodge. The ghost faction male disciple protected his junior sister and dodged to the side of the corridor. However, he saw that line of fire follow them like a shadow, as if it was a gangrene attached to the bone. With a whoosh, it scuttled in front of the two people. Junior sister, please stay your hand. A Xixia Valley disciple anxiously shouted. That's ghost faction disciples senior brother Peng Zhang and senior sister Choan. During the preparation period, it's best that you don't come into conflict, so as to avoid affecting the competition later. Bang. The ghost faction male disciple Peng Zhang completely didn't know what was going on. The little girl actually appeared behind the two people in an instant. He clearly already hid to the other side of the corridor. How could this be? The ferrule swung down and directly smashed onto his junior sister's back, causing her to stagger forward a few steps and spit out another mouthful of blood. Arbor wasn't willing to give up. A cold glint flashed through his eyes, and with a whoosh he once again flew in front of the ghost faction female disciple Choan. He looked down at the girl with a cold gaze and raised the ferrule in his hand high up again. For this attack, she gathered all the mystic energy in her body, and even mobilized the mystic energy in her branch meridians. Wants her to die. But immediately. Stop. After a furious shout, an elderly man in his 50s, whose hair was standing on end like needles, suddenly flew over and blocked in front of the ghost faction's female disciple, Choan. He flew up and aimed a palm at Xiao Mu's chest. How dare you, old man? Murong Sun angrily shouted and arrived next to her disciple with a whoosh. A vigorous mystic energy circled around her disciple and collided with the incoming palm. After a reverberating hum, the elder was sent flying by Murong Sun. He barely landed on the ground before retreating several dozen steps. He clutched his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. Junior sister. Peng Zhang, the male disciple of Ghost Gate, cried out. In the blink of an eye, while Murong Sun was taking care of the elderly man, Arbor's ferrule, which had gathered all the mystic energy around him, had already descended and struck the ghost faction girl's head. Boom! Everyone felt that there was a reverberating sound in their ears. In an instant, they felt that everything around them had quieted down. The Hellgate girl fell heavily to the ground, blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. A defensive artifact in her hand suddenly rolled out from between her fingers, smashing into the ground and breaking into pieces. Junior sister? Junior sister? Peng Zhang's voice trembled as he called out a few times in fear. Cough 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 cough. Blood continuously spewed out of the ghost faction girl's mouth, and there were fragments of her internal organs mixed in the blood. It was truly a ghastly sight. Xixia Valley's disciples were already stupefied. They stood there stupidly and blankly stared at the little girl who was hovering in midair with cold and expressionless eyes. Chapter 392. She's actually not dead yet. Her life is quite tenacious. Arbor snorted, and a mystic guiding talisman matrix abruptly floated around him. A mystic guiding talisman matrix could gather all the mystic energy in the valley's surroundings to the greatest extent and continuously replenish it into one's body. This was truly wondrous in battle. However, this mystic guiding talisman matrix made from intermediate-level yellow talismans could not last for a long time, only 15 minutes. Right now, an endless stream of mystic energy was currently replenishing the mystic energy emptiness caused by Arbor's attack just now. Seeing that the little fellow's body was once again surrounded by mystic energy and his robes were fluttering, everyone stared with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. The two Shisha Valley disciples wished for nothing more than to faint immediately. Oh my heavens! Where did this ruthless little devil come from? She used a defensive barrier to block half of that attack, but now she thinks she's not completely dead yet and wants to attack again, right? The Shisha Valley disciples were already cursing the two Ghost Faction disciples to the bone in their minds. If it weren't for that female Ghost Faction disciple suddenly attacking someone else, how could there be so much quarreling? This seriously made the Shisha Valley disciples both angry and depressed. Since this happened in their valley, even if Master did not blame them, they still failed in their duties after all. They failed to satisfy the guests and even started fighting. Suddenly, stop. A dull middle-aged man's voice abruptly rang out. The two Shisha Valley chief disciples nearly cried tears of joy. Master! Stop again? Why was it so annoying? So long-winded? Arbor narrowed his eyes. His mystic energy had already reached a critical juncture, and the ferrule in his hand emitted a jet-black light again, ready to strike after accumulating power. Let's see if you can still die this time. Let's see if you still have a defensive barrier to block it. Peak Master Murong. This little miss, please show mercy. A person who hurried over abruptly moved to Murong Sun and Arbor's side and cupped his fists in salute. This humble one is Shisha Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang. Greetings to the three Peak Masters. Valley Master Luo hastily saluted Murong Sun and the others with a faint smile on his refined face. May I ask everyone to stop for this Valley Master's sake? What's going on? At this moment, the leader of the Ghoul faction this time, Elder Gui Bubu, rushed over with 30 disciples. Seeing Choan lying on the ground in such a miserable state, Ghost Surf immediately roared, "Who did this?" Although he was shouting angrily, his furious eyes were firmly nailed onto the little stoic's face. It was obvious that this young girl suspended in midair with a black mystic weapon in her hand was the main culprit. "You're blind," the little stoic uttered coldly, a sharp, murderous intent concealed in her eyes. Ghost Surd was furious. He pointed at Arbor. "You little brat, you're too bold. Don't point your finger at my disciple. Just what is it? Go up and ask your disciple yourself." Murong Sun was furious. "Peak Master Murong, Elder Gui, please calm down, please calm down." As if putting out a fire, Shisha Valley's Valley Master hastily appeased the two's fury and said with vigor, "Gentlemen, let's talk things out, let's talk things out. Let's figure out what happened first." Yo, I didn't expect it to be so lively here. What is the Ghoul faction planning to do by mobilizing all of their members? Do they want to start the competition in advance? A faint chuckle was heard from the corridor in the distance. They saw a youth wearing a purple robe and a jade belt walking along the white jade corridor with a grin. Chapter 393. The youth looked to be about 17 years old. His long hair fell loosely to his waist, and his fair face and peach blossom eyes sparkled with light. The corners of his eyes were slightly upturned, and his boundless romantic charm overflowed. His gaze could clearly steal a person's breath. Eldest senior brother, take care." A Daybreak sect disciple shielded his head with an umbrella. Eldest senior brother, it's already August, and the weather is starting to heat up. I'll fan you more, eldest senior brother. Another person was eagerly waving a fan for him. The youth rolled up his sleeves, and there was a careless smile on his thin lips as he occasionally looked up. Arbor happened to look back when she heard the sound, and she directly met the youth's smiling eyes. Both of them were startled. Little girl. The youth's eyes brightened, and he suddenly shouted. Arbor blinked and looked at the youth who was excitedly running toward her. For a moment, she seemed to remember how the youth wanted to trick her several years ago but was ruthlessly tricked by her instead. The stoic face was still that stoic face, completely overlapping with the memory he couldn't wipe away from the bottom of his heart. Duan Yu beamed with joy, and the little gloominess that had lingered in his heart these past few days was instantly swept away when he saw this little stoic. He was well aware that with the little fellow's outlandish talent, she would definitely participate in this 3-sex and 5-factions competition. Thus, he instigated sect master Liang Wanshan to come to Xixia Valley early from the start so that he could see this heartless little stoic as soon as possible. Who would have expected that God's plans would always exceed man's? He waited here and there until he was about to grow moldy, but this little fellow was nowhere to be seen. Today's meeting had really surprised him. He was caught off guard and saw her. Truly surprised and delighted, Duan Yu quickened his steps toward the little stoic. He didn't even glance at the ghost faction's female disciple, Choan, who was lying on the ground and foaming at the mouth. His beautiful peach blossom eyes rippled as he said with a chuckle, "Little stoic, what are you doing? Let's go. It's rare for us to meet, so I'll show you around Xixia Valley. I've been here for several days already, so let me tell you. Don't worry about it." The crown prince slowly walked over and glanced at Duan Yu with his phoenix eyes. "I will bring Jojo around Xixia Valley." "You rascal, where do you want to go?" When Duan Yu turned around, he pointed at Mo Lian as if he had seen the plague and exclaimed in shock, "You? Why are you here?" Preposterous. Why was this person always following the little stoic around? "Humph, you don't need to worry about where I am." Mo Lian grumpily slapped Duan Yu's finger away. Duan Yu raised his finger again. Duan Yu quickly bounced to the little girl's side. "Stoic face, I'm telling you, you're still young right now. You mustn't be abducted by some strange big brother. Some people look like humans, but their hearts are actually very dark and scary." Murong Sun glared at the back of Duan Yu's head. Why did she feel like this youth was like a strange big brother? "What nonsense are you spouting? Peak Master Murong is here, don't you see her?" Mo Lian timely stabbed Duan Yu with a soft knife. Only then did Duan Yu see Murong Sun's ladle-like face. He quickly wiped away his mischievous smile and solemnly walked up to greet her. "Greetings to Peak Master Murong. Disciple Duan Yu, Daybreak Sect's chief disciple." Chapter 394. While Duan Yu met up with the little girl and ran to exchange pleasantries with Murong Sun, Ghost Surd had been standing on the side with a dark expression for a long time. Now that he saw that no one was paying attention to him, how could he swallow his pride? He turned his head and shouted at a ghost faction disciple in a muffled voice, "What are you still standing there for? Don't you find it embarrassing? Bring Choan back. Let's go." "Halt. Did I say you can leave?" Arbor retracted his mystic energy and shouted coldly. Ghost Surd's face was flushed red from anger, and he turned to glare at Arbor. His eyes were so dark that it looked like black water was about to drip out. "Little girl, don't go overboard in everything." "So what if I go overboard?" Arbor's expressionless and sarcastic attitude completely infuriated Ghost Surd. "Does the Holy Water sect want to start a war with our ghost faction right now? What a load of nonsense." Arbor shouted angrily. "No one is allowed to meddle in my personal grudge with her. Get out of the way. You're in the way. You're hindering me from dealing with people." Everyone silently glanced at the little stoic before sympathetically looking at Ghost Surd, who was rebuked. Those who had been rebuked by little junior sister before were very clear that once little junior sister set her mind on dealing with someone, she would not give up just because of a few words of dissuasion from others. Perhaps, The more they dissuaded her, the more unlucky she would be. This was the first time the Ghost Faction elder was angered to the point of vomiting blood by a junior. His face turned dark red, and his lips trembled as he repeatedly shouted, "Great, great. What an arrogant and despotic holy water sect disciple. Everyone, what exactly is going on here?" Shishia Valley's Valley Master could only stand up and mediate for everyone present. "Do you understand the truth?" The little stoic suddenly turned her small face and icily faced that Valley Master. The Valley Master was taken aback by the question and shook his head in embarrassment. "Since you don't understand the situation, why did you suddenly jump out and meddle in other people's business to be the peacemaker?" The little fellow continued to ask expressionlessly, "Is it that in your eyes, I should be a person without a temper because I'm young? Because someone directly tried to disfigure me, so I have to swallow my anger and not retaliate?" The Valley Master was rebuked until he was speechless, so he could only rub his nose and repeatedly shook his head. "Young lady, not to mention your terrifying battle prowess, with that poisonous mouth of yours, who would dare to bully you? Then move aside. It's a personal grudge between me and her, so let's just settle it between the two of us. Why are you talking about sex?" The little girl turned her head with a cold expression and shouted at the Ghost Clan girl who was lying on the ground and pretending to be dead, "Get up! Coward! Don't play dead on the ground." Ghost Surd only felt that his sex reputation had been completely destroyed. He angrily interrupted, "Little girl, don't be unreasonable to be unforgiving. Today I won't let you off." "Or what? Cloud people words. No wonder people don't want to befriend you people." Her icy voice instantly suppressed Surd's curses, and the surrounding people were dead silent. Duan Yu inexplicably shrunk his neck. He inexplicably felt very blessed when he recalled the scene when the little girl dissed him back then. Now it appeared that the little girl had indeed been merciful when she dissed him back then. Looks were still useful. Surd Ghost pursed his lips, feeling both vexed and angry. He also bore a grudge against the Ghost Faction disciple, Choan, who was lying motionlessly on the ground. Chapter 395. If it weren't for this person's brainless actions, how could the sect be humiliated like this? He really wanted to dump this burden and quit, letting this brainless female disciple Choan resolve this problem herself. But as the sect elder leading the team, how could he be willing to make his sect disciple back down in front of others? Otherwise, wouldn't he lose even more face? Ghost Surd's face was gloomy as he stared at the little stoic. "You said Choan attacked you. She has no enmity with you, so why would she attack you?" "Ask her. She's the one who attacked, not me. Your question is rather funny." Arbor's cold gaze swept over him. "Choan, speak. Why did you attack? You don't need to be afraid with the elders here. Did someone threaten you to do something that would harm the sect, so you attacked in anger?" Ghost Surd's words elicited a light chuckle. "Elder Ghost, why don't you set up a stall in a tea house and be a storyteller?" Yang Shirong mocked. Choan lay on the ground without moving, as if she had already merged with the earth. Ghost Surd was so angry that he wished for nothing more than to lift her up and slap her twice. He had already paved the way for her, but this idiot actually didn't climb down the pole. This made his old face flush red, and he couldn't back down no matter what. "Just take it that my Ghost Faction disciple is in the wrong. But you've punished her and hit her before. Choan is currently heavily injured, so you should have vented your anger." "I haven't," Arbor replied coldly. The surrounding melon-eating crowd naturally had speechless expressions. Duan Yu's mouth twitched, but Emo Lien chuckled. His darling's angry expression is so adorable. Look at how sincere her words are, choking Elder Ghost to death with one sentence. At this time, more and more people gathered. The Heavenly Tao sect, Daybreak sect, and Purple Firmament faction disciples who had already arrived at Shishia Valley and were waiting for the competition all came to watch the show after hearing the news. When they heard that the Ghost Faction's elder was attacked by a Holy Water sect disciple, they all wanted to come and see what the situation was. It was one thing for the Purple Firmament faction disciples to have never seen the little stoic. Situ E. Shangkuan, And the others who were once familiar with the little stoic couldn't help but twitch their mouths when they saw the little stoic. They were still wondering who was insulting them, but it turned out to be their stoic little junior sister whom they hadn't seen for many years. How did the people of the Hellgate provoke this little fiend? What else do you want? You're not injured at all. Why are you holding on to my sex disciples and not letting them go? Elder Ghost's face and ears were red. His head was probably about to be filled with blood. The little stoic extended her small, fair hand in front of the Ghost faction's elder. Everyone's gazes fell on her little paw. It was white and tender, small and delicate, and a little chubby. It was a very pretty little jade hand. Do you see this white mark? She left it behind. She injured me, the little stoic said resolutely. The surrounding crowd fell to the ground in unison. Their faces all revealed expressions of wanting to laugh but holding back their laughter. Oh my God, this little stoic was so shocking. That white mark on her little jade hand was so faint that it could be ignored. Attacking me for no reason and injuring me, she deserves to die, Arbor said coldly. How pitiful was her ruined body in her previous life that no one knew better than her how much she valued her body and skin. She didn't wish for it to receive even the slightest bit of injury again. Chapter 396. The reddish-purple face of the ghoul sect elder began to change again, gradually becoming darker and darker. Choan, get up! Ghost Surd angrily roared and kicked Choan, the female disciple sprawled on the ground. Elder, junior sister is heavily injured and can't stand up by herself. I'll help her up. Peng Zhang hastily walked up and used his strength to help Choan up from the ground. Choan lowered her head and didn't make a sound. Her breathing was weak as she leaned against Peng Zhang. Only one eye peeked out from under her bangs, emitting a faint light. Take her away! The Ghost faction elder angrily shouted. I'd like to see who dares to block our path. Bite him! Arbor pointed at the condescending Ghost faction elder. A snow-white and sturdy snow leopard pounced out from behind the crowd without any explanation. It pounced forward and caught the Ghost faction elder off guard, pinning him to the ground. Its sharp teeth suddenly bit the elder's left hand, causing him to scream in pain as his eyes bulged out of their sockets. This is little junior sister's mystic beast? A Daybreak sect disciple exclaimed in shock. Little junior sister has such a valiant mystic beast, so what's the point of competing? She'll lose for sure. Even Elder Ghost can't withstand a bite from this mystic beast. Are you blind? Can't you see that little junior sister's cultivation is only level 8? That's right. But how can a level 8 mystic cultivator summon a mystic beast? Everyone was talking at once, so how could they care about the Ghost faction elder's wretched screams? Elder Ghost circulated a wave of mystic energy and mercilessly smashed the snow leopard's head. Unexpectedly, the snow leopard understood human nature and tilted its head to dodge. At the same time, it raised its sharp claws and slapped him across the face. Elder Ghost's face was bruised on the spot, and 3 glaring claw marks appeared on his face. Shisha Valley's Valley Master was dumbfounded as he watched the increasingly intense farce in front of him. He opened his mouth and looked at Murong Sun pleadingly. Peak Master, please be magnanimous. If the Ghost faction elder suffers any injuries in Shisha Valley, I can't bear the responsibility either. Murong Sun glanced at him. Valley Master, it's just a personal grudge. Why do you have to interfere and cause trouble for yourself? Shisha Valley's Valley Master couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew that he couldn't persuade him anymore. What do you want? Finally, the female disciple of the Ghost faction, Choan, opened her mouth. Her voice was so hoarse that it was as if she had been run over by a wheel. It was quite strenuous for her to speak. Just now, you used your left hand to scratch my face. Now, leave your left hand behind. Xiao Mu said expressionlessly as she threw a short dagger in front of the female disciple with a clang. The snow leopard stopped, but its eyes bulged as it stared at the Ghost sect elder who was wailing while holding his hands. Ghost Surd hurriedly crawled back a few steps, hurriedly escaping from the leopard's mouth. He looked back with lingering fear. The female disciple of the ghoul faction was trembling so much that her entire body was swaying. She was afraid, but more than that, she was naturally angry. Her anger was already uncontrollable and was about to overflow from her chest. If you don't leave your left hand behind, then die. The little stoic flared up as soon as she said it and was about to turn hostile and merciless on the spot. However, Zhang was even more decisive than the female disciple, Choan. When he saw that the little stoic was about to dash up and kill again, he immediately picked up the dagger on the ground and slashed it down. There was a flash of light. Ah! Choan let out a wretched scream. Her face paled and her eyes closed. She immediately fainted in the crook of Zhang's arm. Zhang's eyes, which were hidden under the gray headscarf, were about to practically spill out venom. Chapter 397. You're asking to be disgraced? Xiao Mu coldly tossed out the sentence and trotted over to her master. Let's go. Ghost Surd used his hand to cover the 3 red scratches on his old face from the snow leopard and indignantly led a group of ghost faction disciples past the Holy Water Sect disciples in a single file. Every ghost faction disciple fiercely glared at the Holy Water Sect disciples with a fiendish gaze. Our rest time was delayed by some meaningless people. Let's also go. Mo Lien stepped forward and held the little fellow's hand with a smile. Am I easy to bully? Our dear Xiao Mu suddenly looked up and asked softly. Before Mo Lien could answer, Wei Nanfeng, Princess Mi, the Holy Water Sect disciples, as well as the Daybreak Sect, Heavenly Tao Sect, and Violet Firmament faction disciples watching from the side, all madly shook their heads in unison. They completely disagreed with the little stoic's words. You're easy to bully, huh? You're easy to bully. This was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Then, why did that person suddenly want to scratch my face? The little stoic couldn't figure it out. I keep feeling like her gaze on me had a deeper meaning. It was like she was staring at an enemy from the start. Right, Jojo, Duan Yu interjected. I'm telling you, the onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved. I saw it clearly just now. That woman's eyes were staring straight at him. This must be a debt he incurred. He implicated you. Don't let him get so close to you. You have to know how to protect yourself, Jojo. Mo Lien raised her phoenix eyes and coldly turned to Duan Yu. However, although she was glaring at Duan Yu, Mo Lien started rapidly sorting out suspicious candidates in her mind. After sifting through all of them, a hint of inspiration flashed through her mind. What debt? Arbor was perplexed. Shut your mouth. Before Duan Yu could make a fuss, Mo Lien had already stopped him coldly. Releasing Jojo's hand, Mo Lien looked at Duan Yu with a grin. Come with me. What do you want? Duan Yu suddenly covered his chest with both hands, and his watery peach blossom eyes abruptly widened. He revealed a horrified yet beautiful face and made an action that left people speechless. Let me tell you. Threats were useless. I will not yield. Jojo, I'm telling you, don't look at how this guy looks alright and is only slightly inferior to me, but he definitely owes a buttload of favors. Before Duan Yu could finish his sentence, a line of fire suddenly struck the corner of his mouth. What the fuck? You dare to kill me? Duan Yu threw out a handful of shooting stars with tinkling sounds. They were divided into 3 paths, with 18 shooting stars in each path. Each shooting star was the size of a date pit, and they were aimed at the crown prince's head, hands, and feet. Mo Lien withdrew the flames on her body and sent a shockwave that deflected all of Duan Yu's concealed weapons. As a result, the spectators were unlucky, accompanied by cries like, Mother, Mother, Heavens, and so on. Duan Yu's 18 shooting stars scattered. After being deflected by Mo Lien, they separately flew towards the people of Daybreak Sect, Heavenly Tao Sect, and Purple Firmament faction. The spectators were simply dumbfounded. Who would get caught in the crossfire like you guys? Perhaps the 2 of them were fine after the fight, but the spectators were dying from watching the show. They couldn't understand what was going on at all. This drama was really one scene after another. It was so brilliant that it was an eye-opener. Chapter 398. The little stoic looked up at the two people fighting further and further away. She furrowed her brows and shook her head. She sighed as if muttering to herself, "Men all like to fight so much." Everyone. Murong-sun was amused. She pulled her little girl over and nodded with a smile. "That's why Miss is the best. Miss is so understanding and considerate, unlike those brats, each worse than the last." The brats in the surrounding circle. Murong-sun then turned to Xixia Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang and said with a smile, "Valley Master Luo, if there's nothing else, then we'll go rest first." "Everyone please." Valley Master Luo amiably smiled at Peak Master Murong and gestured for one of the two Xixia Valley chief disciples to continue leading the Holy Water Sect's people to their residences. For this competition, Xixia Valley specially set up several unique courtyards with beautiful environments for each sect's people to live in. The distance between each courtyard was not too far. In general, the contestants' residences were all arranged in the southern region of Xixia Valley. The residences of the three sects were arranged together. The courtyards on the left and right of Holy Water Sect were respectively for Daybreak Sect and Heavenly Dao Sect. Not long after everyone entered the courtyard, Heavenly Dao Sect's Sect Master, Situ Min, and Daybreak Sect's Sect Master, Liang Wanshan, both came to visit Murong Sun and Yang Shirong. The three Peak Masters and two Sect Masters went to the main hall to chat, while the little stoic and her senior sisters went to the side rooms to pack up. There were a limited number of rooms in this small courtyard. After they were arranged, the disciples could only share two people to a room, which was barely enough. The remaining two rooms were allocated by the Peak Masters themselves. When Doya heard that she had to live with someone else, she immediately pounced over and hugged the little stoic's arm, shouting with all her might, little junior sister, let's live together." Chang Yushi pursed her lips. "I still want to live with little junior sister, but you beat me to it." Doya playfully stuck out her tongue at Chang Yushi before dragging the little stoic's left arm towards a small side room. "Little junior sister, do you want to sleep inside or outside?" The carriage stopped at the picturesque entrance to Xixia Valley. A gray-haired, hunchbacked, limping elderly man in his 60s walked out of the carriage. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed heavily. The retainer hurriedly reached out to support his withered left hand. He bowed his head respectfully and said, "My lord, you've overworked yourself these past few days. Please take care of yourself." Lu Yizhi waved his hand at his retainer and didn't say anything. Instead, he continued to walk towards Xixia Valley's entrance with his stooped body. "Who is this guest?" A female disciple guarding the entrance of Xixia Valley was slightly taken aback, and then she very politely saluted the elder. Cough, cough, cough. Lu Yizhi took out an invitation from his sleeve and handed it over. The female disciple cupped her fists and bowed. "So you're a guest elder of the Ghost Sect. Greetings, Your Honor. Your Ghost Sect group has already moved into the 4 southern courtyard. I'll get someone to lead you there." Cough, cough, cough. "Many thanks," the old man replied in a hoarse voice. The retainer supported Lu Yizhi, and the two unhurriedly followed behind the Xixia Valley disciple who was leading the way. After walking for a distance in the boundless sea of flowers, the retainer lowered his voice and asked, "Sir, we came here this time just to see that Miss Chiao?" "Actually, sir, as long as you secretly send someone." The hunchbacked elderly man coughed several times and raised his head to glance coldly at the retainer. The retainer immediately stopped speaking and lowered his head. Chapter 399. Lu Yizhi walked very slowly with a hunched back. He glanced at the Xixia Valley disciple leading the way in the distance and coldly said, "Did you forget that the group of people you sent out didn't even enter Shijio City's Chiao family's courtyard?" The retainer hung his head even lower in shame. "It's better to wait and see. Don't be too ostentatious." The elderly man coughed several times in succession before grabbing the retainer's arm and having him speed up to catch up with the Shishia Valley disciple in front. When the two people passed by the second southern courtyard, they stopped and glanced inside the courtyard. The Shishia Valley disciple hastily said, "The first to third courtyards are where the three sects are located. The Holy Water sect's disciples live in the second southern courtyard." Cough, cough, cough. Lu Iji nodded while coughing while clutching his handkerchief. His pensive gaze was fixed on the entrance to the Holy Water sect's courtyard. He stared for a while before saying, "I heard that there's a spring on the Holy Water sect's snowy peak that releases water all day long. The water is clear and free of impurities, so it's named the Holy Water Spring." Cough, cough, cough. "It can even increase the mystic energy in the disciples' bodies, so it's named the Holy Water Sect." The Shishia Valley disciple nodded with a smile. This disciple has also heard that the Holy Water Sect has more than 800 disciples. "I heard that they were all selected to enter after passing the Holy Waters test." Lu Iji nodded with a smile. Suddenly he saw the courtyard's door open. A delicate and pretty girl in a red short-sleeved shirt walked out while dragging another little girl in plain clothes with a face as cold as snow. The red-clothed girl couldn't help but be startled when she saw the people standing outside the door. She subconsciously took the little girl's hand and glanced at the Shishia Valley disciple with vigilant and suspicious eyes. "What are you standing here for? Little junior sister, please don't misunderstand. This is the Ghost Faction's guest elder. I'll bring them to the Ghost Faction's courtyard." The Shishia Valley disciple nodded at the two with a kind smile. Doyan nodded and turned to say to Arbor, "Little junior sister, let's go. When I came in, I saw a pavilion with a pretty good view. I'll bring you up there to take a look." Arbor nodded and abruptly turned her head. A trace of severity shot out of her eyes and shot directly at the elderly retainer who was peeping at her. The attendant was shocked. Cold sweat was about to drip down from his forehead. "You're up to no good." Arbor was very sensitive to people's auras. Ever since her rebirth, she could tell at a glance who was friendly to her and who was hostile to her. Lu Iji's heart skipped a beat, and he hastily tugged at his retainer. He turned around with a stifled cough and gave the little stoic an unsightly smile. "Little miss, cough, 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 you're thinking too much. We've never met before, so why would I, cough, cough, harbor ill intentions towards you? Hellgate." The little girl raised her voice slightly. The heart of the Shishia Valley disciple who had already experienced her prowess jumped slightly, and he hurriedly went up to salute her. He tried to smooth things over with a smile. "Little junior sister, please don't be angry. This old mister is only a guest elder of the Ghost Faction. He doesn't know anything about what happened earlier. Be careful." Arbor glanced coldly at the elderly man and his retainer. "I'll be the first to send people who harbor ill intentions towards me to hell." The retainer's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. He secretly exchanged glances with the elderly man and watched the little stoic leave with a myriad of emotions. As expected, she was a tough bone to chew. No wonder that person above valued her so much. She really wasn't easy to deal with. Chapter 400. Lu Iji and Elder Ghost were brought to the Ghost Faction's courtyard. When Elder Ghost heard that Lu Iji had come, he immediately led all the disciples out to welcome them. He respectfully led Lu Iji and Elder Ghost into a seat in the hall. "This old man heard that you guys, cough, 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 got into a conflict with a girl from the Holy Water sect and even lost face?" Ghost Surd hastily bowed and begged for forgiveness. "Sir Lu, why we were wrong. We disgraced the estate lord." Lu Iji waved his hand and said disdainfully, "With your lowly cultivation, don't say you're the estate lord's subordinates after you leave." Ghost Sir didn't dare to speak. He and the other Ghost Faction disciples hung their heads and stiffly listened to Lu Iji's reprimand. "Your Ghost Faction investigated the matter this old man instructed for 3 years, but there was no news at all. Sir Lu, that Holy Water sect is located far above the snowy peaks and has a single environment, so it's difficult to sneak in. 2 years ago, We also sent 2 female disciples to sneak in, but they didn't pass that so-called holy water test. Ghost Surd had a bitter expression when he mentioned this matter. Lu Yizhi sneered. You can't even handle such a small matter, yet you still dare to call yourself the estate lord's subordinates? All of you stop, cough, cough, cough. Sir. Ghost Surd and all the other disciples simultaneously knelt on the ground with a plop. Sir, please quell your anger and give us more time. This time, no matter what method we use, we will find out about the holy water spring. Cough, 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 cough. The elder snorted coldly and kept coughing violently into his handkerchief. Sir, is that holy water spring really effective on Sir's illness? You don't need to concern yourselves with this matter. Lu Yizhi impatiently waved his hand at them again. This old man has 30 years of experience in tempering pills. Cough, cough, cough. As long as I have the holy water spring, I think it's only a matter of time before I can refine a mystic breakthrough pill that can allow me to break through to level 15 and enter the ranks of supreme experts. At that time, as long as he broke through to become a level 15 great mystic cultivator and his body entered another profound realm, he would naturally be very different from his current state. Perhaps all the pain from his previous illnesses would be swept away at that time. Suddenly, a figure pounced out from the crowd of disciples, quickly crawled a few steps, and knelt in front of Lu Yizhi. He kowtowed several times and said, Elder, please bestow a level 12 mystic breakthrough pill. Cho-en wants to break through to level 12 in one go. You're just a cripple with a broken arm and a blind eye. What reason do you have to get an incomparably precious level 12 Shen breakthrough pill from this old man? I am willing to give up my life. Junior sister. Peng Zhang raised his head and shouted angrily. Your lowly life is of no use to this old man. Lu Yizhi sneered and looked at the woman with eyes full of mockery. Cho-en kowtowed with all her might. Her head smashed onto the ground with loud bangs. Cho-en is willing to be Elder's vessel. I'm willing to offer all the profound energy in my body to you. I only ask that you give me a level 12 Shen breakthrough pill. Let me break through to level 12 in one go. Afterwards, I can personally kill my enemy in this competition. Lu Yizhi laughed hoarsely. Suddenly, he bent down and forcefully pinched the female disciple's chin, raising her face high up. Cho-en trembled all over. Your face was slowly mended by me needle by needle back then. For this, your father paid a huge price. Chapter 401. Lu Yizhi flung her face away and snorted. Would this old man be interested in a fake face? Elder. Cho-en crawled a few steps forward and hugged Lu Yizhi's left leg with all her might. Her cries were more mournful than the last, and her eyes were filled with intense hope. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. Elder. Lu Yizhi took out a wooden box from his bosom and threw it at the woman's face. Since you're so unbearably thirsty, this old man will fulfill your wish. When this old man returns to my room in a while, I want to see you stripped and washed clean. In addition, this old man isn't interested in a withered flower. One of Cho-en's pupils abruptly contracted, and she tightly gripped the wooden box with both hands. Her fingernails had long embedded themselves in the box's crevices, pricking a trace of blood. Junior sister. Peng Zhang was genuinely concerned about his junior sister. He had watched her cultivate so arduously and assiduously, fearlessly going to various adventure holy lands to temper her physique and abilities. But it was precisely this hard-working her that had her left hand cut off by him, despite the pain. Now, in order to beg for a mystic breakthrough pill, she was willing to degrade herself and betray herself, willingly serving that ugly elder who was even older than her grandfather. Peng Zhang burst out with a loud yell, and then he was forcefully held down by the 2 disciples around him. Junior sister, you can't do this. Junior sister, junior sister. The 2 disciples firmly covered Peng Zhang's mouth with their hands, preventing him from making any more sounds. Peng Zhang struggled on the ground, and his pair of eyes peeked out from under the gray cloth, bursting with heartache and anger. Choan turned her head and coldly glanced at Pengzhang with one eye. Then, she tightly gripped the wooden box in her hand and abruptly turned her face away, no longer looking at him. "Senior brother, although you are very concerned about me, this is far from enough. What I need is a powerful person to protect me by my side, so that I will never suffer any harm. Too weak and simply don't deserve to stand by my side." That night, Choan walked step by step into Elder Lu's room. She blew out the lamp and lay on the cold bed, her whole body cold. She stared straight at the black silk canopy above her head, a teardrop falling from the corner of her eye. Her father, her family, and him. Since she couldn't rely on anyone, she could only work hard and fight for herself. She wanted to become stronger. She wanted to become a great level 12 mystic cultivator. She wanted to trample that bitch under her feet in the competition fair and square. She wanted that heartless man to know that even if it was someone he treasured the most in his heart, once they entered the arena, life and death would be up to fate. Not everything could be controlled by him. This time, she wanted him to be powerless to reverse the situation. She just didn't know if she would still be able to see that cold and indifferent him at that time at my Joe's section break. Arbor slept in the middle of the night, only to hear a commotion outside the courtyard, and the lights were lit up little by little. Doya turned over and placed a calf on her lap. She smacked her lips and continued to sleep, showing no signs of waking up. Arbor glanced at her speechlessly. Why were they all sleeping so well? The commotion outside had already turned the sky upside down. She simply put on her clothes and got out of bed. Just as she pulled open the door, she saw two figures running in front of her one after the other. One tried to pull her left hand, while the other tried to pull her right hand. In the end, the youth who pulled her right hand had his hand slapped away by the youth who was pulling her left hand and questioned him in passing, "What are you doing?" Chapter 402. Duan Yu glared at him. "You're the only one allowed to hold hands?" "Of course." Mo Lien grumpily glanced at Duan Yu and directly pulled Arbor to the main courtyard. "I wonder what's going on outside," Mo Lien whispered. "I saw the 3 peak masters leave their courtyards. They can't even sleep peacefully," a senior sister who woke up grumpily said as she rubbed her eyes. Soon, they saw Yang Shirong walk in with a dark face. She waved her hand at the Holy Water Sect disciples. "Go sleep. Ignore them." All the disciples looked at each other. How could they sleep with such a loud ruckus outside? They heard a male disciple from Daybreak Sect and not the Heavenly Tao Sect say in a low voice, "You people from Coitus Sect say you lost your pet as soon as you arrive and even insist on searching their courtyards from house to house. What kind of logic is this? How can you be so tyrannical and overbearing? Can't you wait until daybreak? Oh my, this handsome brother, why are you so fierce? This servant is so scared. Do you want to touch and see that this servant's heart is still thumping nonstop because of you?" A gentle and charming voice instantly made all the Holy Water Sect disciples' hair stand on end when they heard it. Fuck, those vixens from Coitus Sect came. They were as disgusting as always and had to mumble a few syllables when they spoke. Scram. Someone from the 2 sects shouted angrily, probably because that female disciple from Coitus Sect who threw herself into the man's arms was loathed. Why are you so fierce? If you don't like this servant, then this servant won't lean on you." That woman's voice was mellow and contained a hint of seductiveness as she spoke delicately. Suddenly she raised her voice slightly, and with a coquettish voice that gave people goosebumps, she shrieked, "Aya, it's Big Brother Situ. I didn't even see you. Big Brother Situ, why aren't you calling Mayor here?" Duan Yu shuddered all over when he heard this. Why were the women of Coitus faction each more disgusting than the last? He had to hurry and look at his little stoic more often to wash his eyes and make himself feel better. Yang Shirong's expression turned even uglier. She waved her hand at the disciples and said, "Don't worry about it. Go back to your rooms." The little stoic silently turned around, wanting to listen to Second Antmaster and return to her room to be a very obedient child. However, the speed at which they stirred up trouble was completely out of your expectations. With a thud, the door to the second southern court, where the holy water sect temporarily resided, was kicked to the ground. When Xiaomu turned around, she saw Sid-Yi, that handsome youth with sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, and graceful features, hastily fleeing behind her and Emo Lien as if he was being chased by a ghost. Brother Sidu, don't run. You're making me so nervous. The little stoic got a clear look at that girl called Meng. Her figure was rather impressive under her bright yellow dress. At first glance, she really did have a surging something, and her slender waist couldn't be held in one hand. She was a peerless beauty, but she had a gaudy temperament. Sid hid behind the little stoic and Emo Lien. He shook his body and fiercely rubbed the fine goosebumps that protruded from his arms. He really couldn't take it anymore. Duan Yu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to take such a sudden turn for the worse. He was just about to find a place to hide, but it was already too late. Mei was originally pouncing at Sid-Yi, but when she suddenly saw Duan Yu and Emo Lien after pouncing to the side, she was instantly stunned and screamed with a handkerchief stuffed in her mouth. Chapter 403. Duan Yu jolted in fright and simply subconsciously shrunk behind the little stoic. Emo Lien, on the other hand, wasn't that cowardly. She instinctively leaned closer to the little stoic and tightly grasped the little girl's small hand. Just as Mei was about to pounce forward, the stoic face raised her leg and kicked Mei's stomach under everyone's twitching mouths, sending her flying. Well done. Duan Yu and our dear Sid-Yi both gave the little stoic a thumbs up in their minds. Heavens, they only felt that if their limbs touched that woman from Coitus faction, they would feel very dirty and uncomfortable. The little stoic blocked evil spirits and blocked wind and moon. The stoic and icy face was simply an invincible basin of cold water that could drench people from head to toe and chill them to the core. Why are you making a fuss in the middle of the night? Can't you let people rest? Wei Nanfeng sleepily walked in, followed by Bailey Shi and Princess Michi Mei, struggled to crawl up from the ground, her pretty face already flushed red from anger. She turned around and stormed to Arbor, shouting angrily, "Who are you? You stink to death. Stay away from me." The little stoic's face was frigid, and she directly reached out to sweep away the fragrant breeze drifting to her nose. Duan Yu and Sid-Yi nodded repeatedly. As expected, the little stoic could do what others couldn't. She directly rebuked Chi Mei's face with her words. Seeing that Chi Mei was about to get into trouble, Xixia Valley's Valley Master, who had hurried over, shouted angrily as if putting out a fire, "Stop. Miss Chi, didn't this Valley Master already send people to escort you back to your courtyard? Why are you still causing trouble in the Second Southern Court? You came late enough today and shouldn't have disturbed other people's rest." Chi Mei stomped her feet and her small face was covered in tears. "My little pet swam away. It has a very strong poison. I was worried about everyone and was afraid that it would hurt others. That's why I ordered a group of senior and junior sisters to search the courtyards. Unexpectedly, I was misunderstood by everyone." The little stoic's hair stood on end when she heard this. She glared at Chi Mei and angrily asked, "What little pet? Did it even need to swim?" "My purple flower little snake." Chi Mei sobbed. "Its venom is very strong. If I'm not careful and get bitten, I won't be able to save that person." Everyone suddenly felt a trace of panic in their hearts. They turned back and forth to check their surroundings. Seeing that there was no one around, they let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a peal of laughter was heard from inside the room, and Murong Sun strutted out in a brocade gown. She held a thin rod in her hand and held a small snake that was slightly charred. She smiled at the person behind Chi Mei and said, "Old witch, long time no see. I didn't expect to be given a ration as soon as I arrived. It wasn't easy to get some food these days. Thank you, old witch. It's quite crispy and delicious when roasted. Do you want a bite too?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Peak Master Murong had actually roasted and eaten an extremely poisonous snake from the Joyous Sect. He was truly a powerful person. An old woman's face with drooping wrinkles slowly appeared in front of everyone. Only then did everyone clearly see that the joyous sex faction master, Granny Witch, had also come. They heard that when Granny Witch was young, her figure was bewitching and voluptuous, and her beauty was out of the ordinary. Countless sect disciples prostrated themselves before her, but she used them all as vessels to absorb them one by one. Chapter 404. Later on, Granny Witch seemed to have offended someone, causing her appearance to be completely disfigured, resulting in her current ghastly appearance. However, no one knew what kind of grudge she had with Murong Sun for her to arrange for her disciple to cause such a farce as soon as she arrived at Shisha Valley. Murong Sun ate that purple-flowered snake with relish, but Granny Witch's wrinkled old face had already scrunched up into a ball. It could be seen that the old woman was very angry at this moment. She turned to her disciple, Chi Ming, and fiercely shouted, "Don't you find it embarrassing? Come here." Feeling wronged, Chi Ming walked behind Granny Witch with small, quick steps. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shyness and timidity as she swept her gaze over the outstanding youths. Murong Sun, long time no see. When Granny Witch opened her mouth, her voice was quite crisp, like a nightingale leaving the valley. The contrast between her voice and her appearance caused people to shudder instead. It has been quite a while. Murong Sun casually tossed the roasted snake she finished eating to the ground and cheerfully examined Granny Witch's sagging and wrinkled old face. "Old Witch, your face seems to be a bit more wrinkled than it was a few years ago." Everyone could see that Granny Witch's face twitched slightly. Presumably, her mood was not as calm as she appeared on the surface. Perhaps she already wanted to butcher Peak Master Murong and chew on her flesh in her heart. Today, it is this old woman's disciple who has disturbed everyone, Granny Witch said aloofly. This old woman apologizes to everyone here. Meiyahua, let's go. Setting aside Chi Mei, that oddball, Hua, the beautiful woman in plain white clothes with only a small beaded flower in her hair behind the old woman was quite different from the red and green senior sisters around her. Her expression was serene, and her eyes were downcast. Occasionally, she would raise her head and look at everyone with a trace of benevolence. This was truly a little white flower that grew out of the mud without being stained. Everyone silently said this in their minds and looked at Miss Chi-hua, sympathetically. What a pity! A proper girl from a decent family had to follow a group of Coitus Valley witches in and out. Sigh, it truly made one's heart ache. Wait! Murong Sun's voice immediately made Shisha Valley's valley master, Luo Jinyang, jump in fright. He hastily walked up and said with an apologetic smile, "Peak Master Murong, look, it's quite late now. Can we talk about our business tomorrow?" Murong Sun glared at this good-natured valley master and waved her hand. "I don't have any other intentions. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, you can leave if you want. However, I don't know which idiot kicked down my front door, so it has to be fixed immediately. Otherwise, no one will be able to sleep." "Fix it?" All the Holy Water Sect disciples angrily rebuked in unison. Shisha Valley's valley master, this kind old man, hurriedly nodded his head repeatedly. All right. I will immediately send someone to repair this courtyard door. I guarantee that it will be repaired immediately." Murong Sun glanced at this miserable valley master and harumphed. She quietly grumbled, "You're such a busybody." She even wanted the old witch to personally fix the door for her. This good-natured valley master was like a firefighter all day long. Wherever there was a fire, he would pour water on it. The valley master thought to himself, "I also don't want to. Who knew that you 3 sects and 5 factions would attack me the moment you see me, and you'd go even further each time?" Granny Witch led the group of Coitus sect disciples away resentfully. She was very displeased that she was unable to take Murong Sun and the others down a notch today. Chapter 405. Before parting, that Miss Chi Mayer's gaze kept roving over each of the youths. She was reluctant to part with them and found it difficult to tear her gaze away from Imo Lien. The little stoic suddenly raised her arm. While everyone's mouths twitched, a crow-gold arrow pierced through the air and shot straight for Chi Mei-er's shifty eyes. When Chi Mei-er saw the arrow flying towards her, her soft waist immediately leaned backwards. With a soot sound, the black gold arrow flew past her face at a high speed. "What are you doing?" Chi Mei-er had just straightened her body and was about to curse when she heard another terrifying sound coming from the back of her head. Her slender waist was abruptly grabbed by Granny Witch, and her entire body floated a step to the left. She looked on helplessly as the black gold arrow that she had dodged turned around and shot towards her from the back of her head. If it weren't for Master saving her just now, her head would have been pierced by the crow-gold arrow, and her life would have been forfeit. When she thought of this, Chi Mei's entire body started trembling, and her venomous eyes looked at the expressionless Arbor who was withdrawing his crow-gold arrow. "You!" Xixia Valley's Valley Master was simply speechless. He started to regret it. Why did he agree to the 3 sects and 5 factions back then and allow this lousy competition to be held in his valley? Woo, he was a good old man who couldn't refuse other people's requests. He was always smiling all day and was persuaded to nod with just a few words. If he could have stuck to his principles back then and not allowed them to hold this event in the valley, he could have avoided so much trouble from quarreling with each other. Woo. "Little girl, you're so young, but your heart is so vicious." Granny Witch frowned and sneered. "As expected of a disciple taught by Murong Sun, you're so vicious." "Thank you for the compliment." Murong Sun tugged at her lips. "Damn girl. How could Chi Mei-er tolerate this?" She angrily pointed at Arbor and shouted, "Why are you so vicious?" The little stoic glanced at her and dryly said, "Don't stare at me like that. I'll kill people." Everyone. Wei Nanfeng really couldn't hold back his laughter. Duan Yu and Su, who were standing behind the little stoic, couldn't help but rub their foreheads. "Little junior sister, aren't you thinking too much of yourself? She wasn't even looking at you." Chi Mei-er was so angry that her face turned red and green. She glared at her and shouted angrily, "Who's looking at you?" The little stoic said matter-of-factly and stretched out 2 fingers to indicate the direction of their gazes. "You've been staring at me since just now. I don't like the look in your eyes. And your eyes are too ugly. You're drawing like a female ghost. It's better if you don't come out to scare people at night." Not to mention Wei Nanfeng, this idiot, who was unable to control himself from laughing. Everyone else present, including Bailey Shi, who was usually expressionless, couldn't help but twitch their eyebrows when they heard this. Mo Lien, who had been speechless all this while, suddenly lowered her head to look at the little fellow's serious expression. Well, this baby of his was very serious. She really felt that the joyous Union Valley disciple had been looking at her for some reason. When everyone saw their little junior sister's serious stoic face, they couldn't help but roar with laughter. Murong Sun's mouth twitched, and she lightly coughed to remind the Holy Water Sect disciples who wanted to join the crowd in roaring with laughter. "Your little junior sister is still young, so don't laugh at her." Arbor was baffled and looked up at Mo Lien. Chapter 406. Although she lived to the age of 26 in her previous life, she had never experienced any love affairs. She had toiled for half her life, constantly striving and working hard her entire life. At the time, her mother passed away, and her younger brother was only 2 years old. Her father was instigated by her stepmother to bring their family to the Qiao family's main residence in Guanlan City. In the beginning, they couldn't enter the Qiao family at all and were arranged to live in a small, dilapidated courtyard outside the Qiao family's main residence. It wasn't until Arbor was 16 years old that her family suffered the Qiao family's disdain. She was called trash until she was 16 years old, and her situation only improved after she awakened her mystic meridians. At the time, everyone thought that since she was already over 15 years old, it was impossible for her to successfully awaken her mystic meridians in this lifetime. However, she held back her energy from beginning to end. After she was 16 years old, she suddenly awakened her mystic meridians on her own one day, causing quite a stir in the Qiao family at the time. After all, her situation was considered rather special. After that, even though she successfully awakened her mystic meridians, she still didn't dare to relax. At the time, she thought that since she was stupid, she had to work even harder than others. Thus, she actively participated in all kinds of missions to earn living expenses and continuously train herself in battle. She wanted to improve herself like crazy. She had walked out of danger after mission and joined a very ordinary team. Their team wasn't like other teams, which were all made up of mystic cultivators and superhumans. They didn't even care about body cultivator teams. There were even normal people in Arbor's team. The team of nearly 20 people was made up of mystic cultivators, body cultivators, superhumans, and normal people. Every time they went on a mission, everyone would do their best to help each other and try their best to survive in a vile environment. It wasn't until the second year of the mission that she broke down and cried bitterly for the first time when she saw her younger sister Shaolin's tattered corpse in the wilderness that she cried bitterly. Even though she was called trash and good for nothing for so many years and received constant disdain from the main family, she never cried. But at that time, Shaolin's body was truly too tragic. She couldn't hold back her tears, and they rolled down her face. She only remembered kneeling beside Shaolin's tattered corpse and tightly gripping the doll she had given her back then, sobbing uncontrollably. Ever since Shaolin was sent away, she secretly ran to the wealthy Dou family and visited Shaolin a few times. She even gave her some food and a doll. The doll was embroidered for her by her mother when she was young. Later on, she gave it to Shaolin. In her previous life, until Shaolin's death, she didn't dare to tell Shaolin that she was her older sister. When they met again, she saw her sister's pitiful corpse. At that time, she had been piecing Shaolin's broken body together piece by piece as if she had gone crazy. She wanted to complete her body so that she could at least leave in one piece. But she couldn't even do that. Shaolin's body had been left in the forest for too long and had long been gnawed on by wild dogs. She fought madly with the wild dogs and killed them all. Then she held her poor sister and wept uncontrollably. Later on, she realized that just crying was useless. What could crying do? Other than being able to vent his emotions, there was nothing else he could do. 3 years later, his teammates were eliminated one by one in the harsh environment. In the end, only she and Fan Qiuhe were left. Fan Qiuhe. When Arbor recited this name in her heart, her snowy eyes instantly filled with dark clouds. Chapter 407. She thought she could forget, but reality proved that no matter how hard it was to recall the past, this name was still carved like a sharp blade, landing in the depths of her heart. Fan Qiuhe was a very gentle man. He was 8 years older than Arbor, and he always maintained the appearance of a smiling big brother. He was the eldest son of Guanlan City's Fan family. His birth was very noble, but he was easy to get along with. He was cultured and refined, a very good person. In the team, Fan Qiuhe had always been the leader. He had led everyone out of difficult situations many times, making everyone maintain a reverent attitude toward him. In her last life, Arbor was one of the few people that he had sincerely befriended. Friend. If the others could only be considered Arbor's teammates, then this one could definitely be considered a teammate and a good friend. After the two of them got to know each other better, Arbor was quite dependent on this good friend. His trust in her also deepened day by day, to the point that he was willing to give up his life for her. However, it was this kind of man who always had a gentle smile on his lips. This was the friend that she valued the most in her last life. When only the two of them were left, he gave her the most fatal blow. For 2 years, she had been locked up in the dark room that he had carefully prepared for her. She watched as this good friend of hers, whom she had trusted in the past, knocked on her body all day long, studying her inner world. This person had always said one sentence: "It's really strange, Arbor. Why is it that your cultivation is clearly much lower than mine, but your inner world is bigger than mine? Your mystic sense is really strange when compared to other people's. Can you seriously tell me why?" I'm a person with an apparition of mystic sense. You can't lie to me. This is all thanks to the apparition of mystic sense. You have secrets on you, Arbor, don't you? Please tell me. I'll be very grateful. So funny. If she was a sensible person, she wouldn't have fallen into such a passive situation. She didn't know anything. Only a silly girl who didn't know anything would be deceived into such a situation. Jojo. She felt her body become light. She was actually picked up by that guy, Mo Lien, in front of everyone's eyes. She stared at him with her big, dark eyes, staring straight at him. You're in a daze, my Jojo, Mo Lien frowned and said softly, your expression makes me uncomfortable. It was as if there were countless thoughts hidden within, and it was so heavy that it made one feel uncomfortable. You must be tired after messing around for most of the night. Ciao ciao, let's go to sleep. Mo Lien simply picked up the little lady horizontally and turned around to stride towards her room. Everyone was speechless. Behind him, Murong Sun fumed with rage and hollered, damn brat, you're really pushing your luck more and more. What did that chicken claw girl mean? Xiao Mu's puzzled voice rang out. Could it be that she wasn't looking at me? Everyone was speechless. She was just used to walking with her fingers curled up like an orchid, but you called it a chicken claw. How embarrassing. She's looking. She's looking at you. Mo Lien said with a smile. My Jojo is the best. That's right. Arbor nodded, thinking that the youth was very correct. She knew her taste was right. That gaze was clearly directed at her. That despicable woman actually dared to use such a disgusting gaze to stare at her. The arrow she shot at her just now was still too light. Chapter 408. The next morning, Myriad Factions Faction Master, Fei Pingyi, also rushed over with his son, Fei Qing. Xixia Valley's Valley Master thought that the 3 sects and 5 factions had all arrived, so he gathered everyone to discuss and advance the competition. Everyone actually understood the Valley Master's feelings very well and sympathized with him. He really wanted to send them, this batch of plague gods, away as soon as possible. Hurry up and finish the competition and scram. Don't cause trouble in Xixia Valley. Who knew? I am Zhou Chao. 2 days ago, I received Faction Master's notice that our Myriad faction still needs to wait for Eldest Miss to join up. Eldest Miss and her group are estimated to arrive the day after tomorrow. A Myriad faction disciple in his early 20s spoke somewhat uneasily in front of so many people from the 3 sects and 4 factions. Granny Witch laughed crisply. Her wrinkled old face was full of disdain. Ninggalai, this coward, procrastinates every time he does something. He wants to be a good person yet doesn't want to offend either side. How can there be such a good thing? Isn't that so? Myriad Factions Faction Master, Fei Pingyi, was over 50 years old. He had a long, thin and narrow horse-like face, and his small eyes were slightly narrowed as he sneered. If we had decided to have eldest Miss Ning participate in the competition from the start, there wouldn't have been so much troubles. Humph. Granny Witch snorted. Forget it, we don't mind waiting 2 more days. Thank you for your understanding, seniors. The Wanxiang sect disciple wiped his sweat and respectfully bowed to the group. Myriad Factions Faction Master, Ning Guilai's second brother, Ning Gidong, sat in the Myriad Factions group, not daring to let out a fart. How would he dare to oppose Granny Witch and Fei Pingyi? His petty appearance was not as natural and unrestrained as that young disciple, Zhou Chao, and was very disdainful of him. We don't mind. It's only the 7th of August anyway, and there's still a long time before the scheduled 14th of August. It's fine as long as eldest Miss Ning arrives on time. Daybreak Sect's Faction Master, Liang Wanshan, said with a wave of his hand with a bright smile on his square face. This was Daybreak Sect's Faction Master, Liang Wanshan. It was the sect master that her father had always talked about. After her father was expelled from Daybreak Sect, he still held this sect master in high esteem. Looking at him now, Liang Wanshan could be considered a straightforward person. Qiao Zhongbang wasn't Liang Wanshan's disciple back then. His master was an elder in the sect. Arbor had once deliberately found time to ask about his father's past and had a chat with him. He learned that his father's master was called Wei Cheng and was a very cold-hearted person, which was why he mercilessly expelled his father from Daybreak Sect after his father's mystic veins were damaged. As for the person who framed Qiao Zhongbang, Arbor also knew his name. That person was called Mu Liangde, and he entered Daybreak Sect at the same time as her father. They were once best friends and lived in the same room, eating and living together. But it was precisely this fellow disciple and good friend of Qiao Zhongbang's, who he didn't guard against at all, who had actually secretly plotted against him. He put a slow-acting poison in his tea and fed it to Qiao Zhongbang every day and night. Over time, the poison accumulated in his body and completely destroyed his mystic veins. If it weren't for the sapling's leaves helping her father sense mystic energy anew and reconstruct his mystic veins, Qiao Zhongbang would have completely become a cripple in this lifetime and would never be able to recover his identity as a mystic cultivator. Xixia Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang's eyelids suddenly twitched when he saw Miss Qiao staring fixedly at Daybreak Sect's faction master Liang Wanshan. Chapter 409. Cough. Valley Master Luo hastily said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's wait for eldest Miss Ning for another 2 days. Once eldest Miss Ning arrives, the competition can be held in advance." The Omni-faction disciple, Zhou Chao, didn't respond, but Liang Wanshan continued, "Then let's wait until eldest Miss Ning arrives. At that time, eldest Miss Ning will be fatigued from the long journey, so she will certainly need to rest for 1 or 2 days. Valley Master, the competition isn't urgent." His words were indeed reasonable. The Omni-faction disciple, Zhou Chao, cupped his hands at Liang Wanshan and revealed an expression of endless gratitude. The Valley Master's eagerness to finish the competition as quickly as possible and immediately chase them out was evident. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to sense it. Xixia Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang, laughed awkwardly and sighed unhappily in his heart. This group of plagues still had to stay here for a few more days. Hopefully, they wouldn't cause any more trouble for him during these few days. He kept feeling that he had rapidly aged in merely a few days, and many strands of white hair had sprouted. It was all because of the 3 sects and 5 factions' worries. Sect Master Liang, does your sect have a disciple named Mu Liangde? Arbor suddenly asked, her eyes still staring unblinkingly at Sect Master Liang Wanshan. Liang Wanshan had long discovered that this holy water sect girl had been staring at him. Yesterday, when he and the Heavenly Tao sect's sect master, Situ Min, paid a visit to the 3 peak masters, he had noticed that this chilly little girl had been staring at him without blinking. Sect Master Liang was adept at handling matters and had already secretly ordered people to investigate. He found out that this little girl was the Holy Water sect's youngest disciple and also Peak Master Murong's most beloved last disciple. Normally, as long as no one provoked the little girl, she would speak very politely. Liang Wanshan smiled at Arbor and said with a nod, "There is indeed a person named Mu Liangde. Is Miss acquainted with him? Liangde, please stand up." All the disciples were seated behind their own sect or clan master. The 3 sects and 5 factions basically had around 30 disciples in each group. Fortunately, Xixia Cloud Valley's conference hall was quite large and was packed to the brim. When Mu Liangde of the Daybreak sect heard the sect master's call, he respectfully stood up. Wearing the Daybreak sect's unique white robe, he was over 30 years old, but his face was fair and beardless. His appearance was handsome, and his posture was confident and at ease. The moment he stood up, he attracted the coquettish glances of the Coitus sect's female disciples. Mu Liangde smiled at the young lady. "May I know who you are? Liangde doesn't seem to have seen you before." The little girl nodded and said seriously, "It's good that you don't know me. In the first round of the competition, I challenge you. You just have to remember that I am someone who is about to beat you to death." Everyone was speechless. The corner of Xixia Valley's Valley Master's mouth kept twitching. He had just been silently praying in his heart that the 3 sects and 5 factions should not cause any trouble for the next 2 days, and now, trouble had come again. Mu Liangde did not get angry and actually smiled very confidently. He said humbly and courteously, "Since Miss wants to challenge me, then I can only accompany you. However, whether the first round of the competition is between you and me is still subject to discussion." When Arbor stood up, everyone's mouths involuntarily twitched. Arbor turned his small face and looked at Xixia Cloud Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang, who had turned his head away. "Good person, Valley Master. I want to challenge Mu Liangde in the first round. Is that all right?" Chapter 410. The good person Valley Master really wanted to cry. Call this little girl savage, but look at her soft and squishy little thing. She was more fair and adorable than anyone else. Call her indecent. She was more serious and expressionless than anyone else. Every sentence she said sounded quite serious when separated, but it was extremely hilarious when strung together. She even said, "I'm someone who's about to beat you to death." These words were truly hilarious. We still have to draw lots according to the order of the competition. This way, it's fairer for everyone. Xixia Valley's Valley Master gave the excuse he had thought of long ago. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the little girl's slender brows furrow into a knot. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was distressed, so he quickly smiled kindly at the little girl. "However, little girl, don't be impatient. Even if you didn't draw Mu Liangde in the first round, it doesn't mean you won't draw him every time." Mu Liangde. What's going on? He felt like Xixia Valley's Valley Master spoke as if he was a prize. Draw or not draw? If you draw, you'll get the grand prize. If you don't be discouraged and continue to draw. Then will the results of the draw be announced? Will the name of the person who draws the number plate for Mu Liangde's match be announced? The little girl seemed to be especially reasonable today as she continued to interrogate good-naturedly. The Valley Master instantly felt that the little girl was giving him face, so he nodded cheerfully. That's right. All the names of the competitors will be announced 1 day in advance. I will have the Valley disciples prepare them then." But our dear Qiao Mu didn't say anything else and sat down obediently. Only the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions kept feeling some kind of energy faintly lingering above their heads. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with the little girl's style today. Shouldn't she immediately berate Mu Liangde? Why did they feel so strange when she suddenly asked the Valley Master if they would announce some sort of name list? However, Mu Liangde was oblivious to the impending calamity and smiled coolly. He lifted his white robe and sat down with a ramrod straight posture. When he sensed a gaze, he turned his head and met Duan Yu's eyes. Mu Liangde naturally did not dare to slight this sect master's eldest personal disciple. He nodded at Duan Yu with a smile, but he was very puzzled as to why the other party was shooting him a meaningful gaze. When the Valley Master saw that everyone had reached a preliminary agreement, his tense mood finally eased a little. He laughed and said to everyone, "Since we still have to wait for 2 more days, then everyone can do as you please during these 2 days. If you want to leave the valley for a walk, that's fine. If you want to cultivate in seclusion, you'll have to hurry." The meaning behind the Valley Master's words was, whether you scram or go into seclusion, in short, please don't cause trouble in Xixia Valley. Everyone pretended that they didn't understand what the Valley Master meant. They all nodded with a smile and followed the people from their respective sects back to their residences. For the next 2 days, the Valley Master felt very comforted. The people of the 3 sects and 5 factions all closed their doors and rested in their own courtyards. Every time Xixia Valley's disciples went to deliver food, they would always bring back news of peace and tranquility to the Valley Master, causing the Valley Master's nerves, which had been stretched taut for 2 days, to finally relax slightly. That night, Ning Bihuan finally arrived at Xixia Valley with a team of more than 20 people led by her. In view of everyone's excellent performance these days, the Valley Master planned to treat everyone to a small banquet out of his own pocket as a welcome dinner for everyone. When everyone arrived, Ning Bihuan's group was already there. Chapter 411. Eldest Miss Ning led her people and boldly sat at the main table in the center. The remaining Omni-faction disciples surrounded Ning Bihuan's table and also took up 2 or 3 tables. The small feast was set up next to the flowery pavilion in the valley. There were a total of 26 tables, and the dishes could be considered very sumptuous. Xixia Valley had always lived in seclusion, so there was quite a bit of grain stored in the valley. It was rare for them to be able to have a good meal, so the Holy Water Sect disciples hurried over early, planning to occupy a good seat. In the end, they saw Ning Bihuan's corpse-like face staring gloomily at them. To be more precise, Ning Bihuan's stiff and cold corpse-like face was facing Immerse. Her serene eyes unwaveringly stared at the youth in front of her. She almost instantly recognized this youth as the person who had appeared in her younger sister's remnant life lamp. Her deep gaze stared straight at the youth, but she didn't receive the slightest response. The youth's gentle gaze landed on the little girl beside him the entire time, so how could he notice Ning Bihuan's gaze? The little girl had changed into a pink robe today. The little fellow, who always wore plain clothes, appeared even more pinkish and tender after changing into a small robe, as if she was carved from jade. Immerse didn't notice Ning Bihuan's overbearing gaze, but the little fellow caught it at once. At this time, Ning Bihuan's gaze had already shifted to the little girl. When Arbor clearly saw Ning Bihuan's appearance, she couldn't help but be taken aback. This girl seemed a bit familiar. Her face was oval, and her willowy eyebrows were slightly curved to her temples. She wore a cyan robe, and her entire person appeared to be in high spirits. Ning Bihuan saw her somewhat bewildered appearance and knew that she had already forgotten about her idiotic younger sister, Ning Bifan. It wasn't that she cared much about that idiot. She just didn't like people directly climbing over their Omni-faction's head to behave atrociously. She, the one surnamed Ning, wasn't that easy to talk to. Ning Bihuan curled her lips and looked straight at the little girl. Do you feel that my face is a bit familiar? Half a month ago, you killed someone in the adventurer base near the Great Swamp. She had the same face as me. That girl was my twin sister, Ning Bifan. Realization dawned on Arbor's face. He nodded at Ning Bihuan and said, I remember now. It's that woman who put her face in front of me and kept telling me to hit her. After I hit her, she asked me why I dared to hit her. She's such a strange person. The senior sisters of the Holy Water Sect didn't understand the reason, but they could understand how hilarious it was when they heard the little fellow's explanation. Ning Bihuan naturally didn't know that such a thing had happened at the adventurer's base, but she had always understood the extent of her brainless younger sister's stupidity. She didn't doubt the young lady's words. Are you here to avenge your sister? Arbor looked at her and asked. Ning Bihuan sneered, do I look like such a bored person? If an idiot dies, then so be it. I'm here to challenge him. Ning Bihuan's finger pointed straight at the youth Immerse. A bellicose flame danced in her eyes. You're very strong. I want to challenge you. When the people from the Daybreak sect, the Heavenly Dao sect, and the other 4 factions came over, they just happened to see Ning Bihuan pointing at Immerse and issuing a challenge. Everyone couldn't help but fall silent. The competition hadn't started yet, but there were already people issuing challenges one after another. Young Master Mo isn't a member of our Holy Water sect. He only came to watch the competition. Chapter 412. Su Shanshan coldly rejected Ning Bihuan's challenge. Ning Bihuan, your opponent is us. Don't get the wrong opponent. Ning Bihuan pursed her lips non-committally and stood up to look straight at Arbor. All right then. After the competition ends, I hope to battle with young Master Mo and see who's better. Arbor was baffled. Miss Ning, why are you staring at me? Why are you staring at me when you want to challenge young Master Mo? Am I not young Master Mo? Ning Bihuan was also a bit gloomy. She originally didn't come to seek justice for her idiotic younger sister. From beginning to end, She was willing to participate in this competition with only one goal: to not let anyone bully her Omni faction and tell anyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions that her Omni faction couldn't be bullied. In addition, she wanted to challenge the white-clothed young master. She saw that powerful youth in the miniature of her younger sister's life lantern, and this youth practically ignited all the fighting blood in her body at that time. She wanted to fight. She was a person who lived for the sake of fighting. Hello, stoic-faced miss. Do you think I want to look at you while speaking? In reality, that young Master Mo of yours didn't even spare a glance at other people out of the corner of his eye from beginning to end. She only spoke to Arbor because she had no other choice. Mo Lien, someone wants to challenge you. The little girl tugged at his sleeve. I'm not free. Mo Lien held the little girl's small hand and followed the Holy Water Sect group to take their seats. You'll definitely accept my challenge. Ning Bihuan stood up and stared darkly at Mo Lien. She threw down this sentence with a stern face, but the latter completely threw it to the back of her mind. Xixia Valley's Valley Master hurried over after hearing the news. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw that the 3 sects and 5 factions were all present and were chatting softly, clinking cups, drinking wine, and eating. He had just received news that eldest Miss Ning had quarreled with the Holy Water Sect disciples, so he thought that this group of young ladies would turn the entire banquet upside down again. Unexpectedly, the scene he saw was so harmonious. It truly surprised and delighted the Valley Master, and he almost wanted to shed a tear for himself. It truly wasn't easy to be a competent peacemaker. After 3 rounds of wine, everyone was 80% full. On a whim, Xixia Valley's Valley Master ordered someone to bring over the lot pot and said to everyone with a chuckle, seeing that everyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions has gathered, I might as well bring forward the competition. If eldest Miss Ning doesn't have any objections, how about we set the competition for the day after tomorrow? Ning Bihuan waved her hand, a stiff smile hanging on her stiff little face. We martial artists aren't that particular. The day after tomorrow is the day after tomorrow. It's up to you. Miss Ning is truly straightforward. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was overjoyed. Dear ancestors, hurry up and finish the competition and scram. After the Valley Master signaled with his eyes, Xixia Valley's disciples hastily carried the 8 bamboo tubes to the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions. There are 120 pairs of numbers here. If you draw the corresponding number, go to our disciples and register. The Valley Master explained with a smile, then let all the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions draw lots. In any case, it was all up to luck, so no one paid much attention to it. One by one, they reached into the lot pot and took out a lot. 2 Xixia Valley disciples sat on the side to register the lot and name. Our dear Qiao Mu abruptly stood up and pattered over to Daybreak Sect's table. Duan Yu immediately turned around in excitement, and his peach blossom eyes blinked as he asked, Jojo, you were looking for me? Chapter 413. I'm not looking for you. Arbor shook her head and looked at Mu Liangda, who was sitting at the same table as Duan Yu. Mu Liangda stood up and smiled at the little girl in a self-righteous manner. He asked amiably, Little miss, you're looking for me again? Duan Yu pursed his lips at him. Who's looking for you? The little girl is looking for you to beat you to death. She's looking for you? Arbor nodded. What's your number? This one is number 82. Mu Liangda looked at the number in his hand and smiled good-naturedly at Arbor. He wasn't afraid of this little girl. Even if the little fellow said she wanted to beat him to death on the day of the competition, he would only treat it as a joke. What a joke! This little girl even shamelessly boasted that she wanted to beat him to death in the first round of the competition? Ha! It was hilarious just thinking about it. She really was a little girl spoiled rotten by her elders. It wasn't a good thing to go out and gain experience with such blind confidence. She would be killed by her own arrogance and stupidity. That's right, he just didn't believe that he, Mu Liangda, could be defeated by a little girl with his skills? Ha, don't joke around. He wasn't a simple mystic cultivator. Everyone in the sect knew of his abilities. Even his master, Wei Cheng, had to take his identity into consideration and flatter him a lot of times. Jojo. Duan Yu pulled her aside and whispered to her, "This Mu Liangda is famous in the sect for being a smiling tiger. I heard that he has some connections with Guanlan City's talisman patrician family. He seems to be from a side branch of that family. He has many powerful talismans in his possession." As he spoke, he stuffed a small box of concealed weapons into her hand. "If you really fight him, don't let him throw talismans. Feed him a bunch of shooting stars first and beat him to death." Talisman practitioner? The little fellow was startled, but she took the box that Duan Yu stuffed into her hand and nodded repeatedly. "Number 82 was it?" She first ran back to her own table and browsed through all the senior sisters' hands. There was no number 82. Then she ran to Sidu Yi's table and had him check if anyone in the Heavenly Tao sect had that damn number 82. "Jojo, do you really want this number 82? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but tease. "Then what if the person holding number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you? For example, if you picked a lot, your opponent would be stronger. Naturally, others wouldn't be willing to trade with you." Xiao Mu cast him a glance, and her small brows creased deeply again. "Troublesome. There's no 82. Sidui didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he returned after asking around. Arbor was a little angry. He turned around and glanced at Bailey Shi, who was sitting in the Purple Firmament faction seat. He frowned and thought for a while, then ran over on his own. "Do you have 82? The little fellow poked Bailey Shi's arm and stared at him. Bailey Shi glanced at her and did not refuse. However, when he went to ask his fellow disciples, there was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. His hard work paid off, and he finally got the answer from Bailey Shi. The holder of lot number 82 was a 15 or 16-year-old young girl from the Violet Firmament Guild. Her face was round like a delicate red apple. Miss Chiao looked down at her lot number. "I'm number 53. Are you willing to exchange with me?" "Sure, it's not registered anyway." Yuan Jixin, the girl who picked up lot number 82, very straightforwardly handed over the lot number in her hand. In fact, the Valley Master had long seen everything. Cough, cough, this was clearly blatant cheating. Chapter 414. Why didn't anyone stop them? And so many shameless people even popped out to support them. Valley Master expressed that he was very stifled. Seeing them act so openly, he could only choose to be blind. "Thank you." The little girl thanked him politely, took the number from the other party, and handed her number 53 to the other party. Then she added, "If you can't beat that number 53, I'll help you beat him back later. I'll help you vent your anger." Yuan Jixin giggled. Number 53 took that number and glanced at it, silently speechless. Bailey Shi's mouth twitched helplessly. "Miss Chiao, number 53 is standing next to you. HM? What a coincidence." The little girl turned her head and saw the face of an ordinary passerby. Number 53 was also a Purple Firmament faction disciple, but he was considered one of the weaker ones among the many senior brothers and sisters. So when the little girl's gaze shot over, number 53 hurriedly raised his hands and said in exasperation, "Don't worry, little girl. I definitely can't beat senior sister Yuan Jixin. Once senior sister makes a move, it'll only be a matter of 2 or 3 moves, and I'll immediately roll off the stage." This jokered everyone laughed and scolded. Yet the little fellow heaved a sigh of relief and returned to her table after bidding farewell to Bailey Shi and the others. Seeing her return, Emo Lien couldn't help but chuckle softly. The little fellow finally got her wish after busying herself for a round, but why was it so interesting? Emo Lien propped up his chin with one hand and turned his head to look at her with an uncontrollable smile. "If that girl with number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you, what do you plan to do?" Our dear Xiao Mu was expressionless, but her 2 small brows furrowed again. "That Miss Yuan is pretty good. She's not a man, so I can only drop it." Everyone was a mystic cultivator, and Emo Lien and Arbor's conversation wasn't low. The youths at the nearby tables all heard it, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes when they heard this. What did she mean? So what if he was a man? Men were discriminated against, right? Wei Nanfeng chuckled as he squeezed over with a wine jug in his hand. If number 82 is a man and he's unwilling to exchange with you from your tone, you plan to beat him up overnight and directly snatch away the number? Our dear Xiaomu nodded honestly. It couldn't be helped. She planned to do that from the start. However, number 82 was a girl, so it was better to be more refined. Wei Nanfeng winked at Emolian and said meaningfully, I feel that this little lady is even more mischievous than your Yu. She needs to be taught. When Morong Sun heard this, she immediately shielded her. What? You have an opinion? I teach my disciple too well. Wei Nanfeng hurriedly flattered. Indeed, indeed. Peak Master Morong, this disciple has misspoken. Morong Sun rolled her eyes at him and reached out to pick up food for her youngest disciple. My dear disciple, you were busy the entire night and didn't eat much. Your body is still growing. Peak, teat eat mrong to chow eat, tease to eat teat, ti chow. Tea. After a short while, the small plates were piled up into a small hill. Come Jody more. Mo Lien placed the chopsticks in her hand and looked at her with a grin. You'll only have the strength to beat people when you're full. Everyone, Young Master Mo's style was off. If Hui Feng was here, he would definitely chuckle and say, sorry, His Highness has always treated the little girl like this. Chapter 415. 2 days later. Everyone had recuperated until they were abnormally full of energy. One team after another set out to the northern part of Xixia Valley, which was an extremely spacious field. The forest here wasn't as lush, so the valley master had long made preparations. He ordered people to set up a large stage and also set up many seats for everyone. The 10 or so silk seats in the front row were naturally prepared for the sect masters and elders of the various sections. The disciples each sat on a row of small square stools in the back row. Some extremely bored people even prepared their own tea and snacks, intending to eat while watching the show. The valley master set up a gong on the side in imitation. A male disciple of Xixia Valley tied a red ribbon around his head and held a gong hammer with a fluttering red ribbon in his hand. The valley master had just sat down at the head seat in the center and exchanged pleasantries with the peak masters and sect masters beside him with a smile on his face. Just as he was about to announce the rules and call out the numbers, he heard the gong ring with its clang. Everyone, the freaking valley master should be feeling very depressed right now. He hadn't even started calling out the numbers, yet that idiot disciple had already started ringing the gong. Xixia Valley's valley master turned his head to glare at that idiot disciple from afar. That disciple stood there with an innocent expression and smiled foolishly at him while holding the gong hammer. I'll first announce the rules. We'll proceed according to the order of the lots. As long as one side concedes defeat, the competition will end. If you can still fight without admitting defeat, then continue fighting. We're all members of the 3 sects and 5 factions, so it's best if we don't overdo it. Xixia Valley's valley master laughed. Alright, now, let's invite number 1 onto the stage. The competition begins. Everyone looked towards that young disciple holding the gong hammer. That idiot didn't hit the gong when it was supposed to and kept staring at the valley master as if waiting for his order. The valley master waited for a long time but didn't hear the gong ring. He turned his head to glare at that disciple and roared angrily, "Why don't you hit it?" Everyone roared with laughter. With a clang from the gong, the 2 disciples number 1 flew onto the stage with vigorous postures and started exchanging blows without another word. When mystic cultivators battled, the strength of mystic energy was to a large extent. At this time, mystic cultivators had yet to realize the importance of mystic consciousness, so they could only see mystic energy flying back and forth and smashing directly at the other party. Arbor took a cursory glance at the mystic skills used by these 2 mystic cultivators and could roughly determine that they were mid-level mystic skills. Most of the mystic skills that were circulating in the market were elementary mystic skills. For people like them who had joined a sect, being able to cultivate intermediate mystic skills was already considered pretty good. Only Master's personal disciples, those kind of disciples with decent talent, would be able to practice the sect's high-level profound skills, and even be able to go to the treasure pavilion to browse the higher-level ones. In a battle of profound skills, when a high-grade profound skill went up against a mid-grade profound skill, needless to say, the high-grade profound skill would definitely have the upper hand. However, the two people in front of him were displaying mid-grade profound skills, so it would depend on their comprehension of the profound skills. After a smart person finished reading the profound skill, not only would he be able to completely comprehend it, he would even be able to comprehend some more profound skills based on this foundation. However, it was clear that these two people weren't particularly intelligent, so their mystic skills were displayed in accordance with the norm. One trained his hands, while the other cultivated a mystic skill that trained his head. Therefore, when the other party clawed at him, that person always liked to use his head to block it. This made our dear Xiao Mu laugh in her heart, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Number 2. Holy Water Sect's disciple Chenhanzi versus Ghost Faction's disciple Pengzhang. The Valley Master picked up the number plate beside him and announced, Chapter 416. The Shishia Valley disciple forcefully struck the gong. Clang. After the gong sounded, Chen Hanzi and the Ghost Faction disciple, Pengzhang, flew onto the stage and cupped their fists in greeting. A venomous glint flashed through the Ghost Faction disciple's eyes, and his gaze subconsciously landed on his junior sister. Cho and senior brother will definitely avenge you today, junior sister. Everyone from the Holy Water sect deserves to die. If it weren't for you guys, how could his junior sister, Choan, be such a strong-willed girl, submit herself to that ugly and sickly old man? Pengzhang pulled out an item as thin as an iron wire. This was his level 7 mystic weapon, Mystic Spider Silk. It was incomparably sharp and also extremely good at concealment. Usually, only when the Mystic Spider Silk was right in front of the enemy's eyes would they be startled to realize that it had slit their throats. Pengzhang took out his mystic weapon right off the bat. He had made up his mind to make Chenhanzi bleed on the spot within 3 moves. Chenhanzi sneered and suddenly summoned her exquisite awl from her conscious with a shake of her hand. The exquisite awl was triangular, so the sharpness of its tip was definitely stronger than the mystic spider silk. Moreover, this awl also had a wondrous use, which was that the awl head could suddenly lengthen. Only when the enemy died would they realize this point. This level 9 mystic weapon was a treasure she had dug out from Maple Pavilion. It was quite handy, and she normally wouldn't take it out to use unless it was an important situation. But now, since the other party had also taken out a mystic weapon, could it be that she had to passively take a beating? None of the Holy Water Sect's members were afraid of trouble. Pengzhang channeled mystic energy into his hands and covered the mystic spider silk. He took a step forward and directly swiped it at Chenhanzi's neck. When this move was used, Lu Yun's eyes turned completely gloomy. This Ghost Faction disciple clearly wanted to take her disciple's life from the start. Doya nervously clenched her hands. Although she didn't make a sound, her large, watery eyes clearly revealed her anxiety. Chenhanzi fell backward on her back and suddenly threw out the exquisite awl in her hand. Upon closer inspection, the awl's tip collided with the mystic spider silk, and it actually created a tiny spark. Chenhanzi's body turned upside down and quickly kicked out twice. Borrowing the force of the kick, she flipped over and landed steadily on the ground with a backflip. The exquisite awl once again returned to her hand, and a ray of profound energy light burst out from the sharp awl, sweeping out an arc-shaped energy ripple as it charged straight at Pengzhang. Pengzhang repeatedly took a few steps back, and he was barely able to stand firm when he felt a sweetness in his throat, causing him to fiercely swallow down a strand of surging blood. In the depths of his eyes, which were covered by the gray cloth, there was a hint of killing intent. "Come out, thousand-faced venomous spider." A trace of viciousness flashed across Pengzhang's eyes. Holy water sect disciple, you forced me. If it weren't for the fact that you were so insensible and refused to be executed obediently, why would I summon the thousand-faced venomous spider? This time, you're the one who brought this upon yourself, and you're going to die a miserable death. Don't blame others. Peng Zhang grinned and pointed at Chenhanzi. Poison spider, this is your lunch. Go. Hiss. The thousand-faced venomous spider waved its 8 long legs and crawled towards Chenhanzi at an extremely fast speed. Chenhanzi's expression froze, and she hastily released her level 9 mystic beast, the silver wolf. When the silver wolf charged towards the thousand-faced venomous spider, Chenhanzi also swiftly dashed towards Peng Zhang. Substantial killing intent had already condensed in her eyes. Peng Zhang sneered and flung out his mystic spider silk. The instant he attracted Chenhanzi's attention, he swiftly took out something from his sleeve and lightly pinched it. Chapter 417. Arbor, who was sitting in his seat, abruptly stood up and stared at Peng Zhang with his sharp, cold eyes. Hanzi, quickly admit defeat. Come down. Lu Yun also stood up and looked at her disciple with eyes full of anxiety. However, in the blink of an eye, the 8-legged venomous spider suddenly spat out a mouthful of venom with a hiss, and its sharp little venomous fangs abruptly bit at the silver wolf's paw. The silver wolf was very intelligent and naturally knew that this thousand-faced venomous spider's teeth were very formidable. However, just as it wanted to escape, it discovered that its paw was hooked by something. When it looked down, it discovered that it was a ball of spiderweb that had unwittingly entangled its paw. The thousand-faced venomous spider bit down on the silver wolf's white fur. The silver wolf immediately fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. On the other side, Chenhanzi discovered that an exotic fragrance had suddenly burrowed into her nose. Just as she cursed inwardly, she suddenly heard the silver wolf's wretched howl. She panicked, and when she was distracted again, Peng Zhang's mystic spiderweb was already slicing towards her neck. Punk, you dare! Lu Yun shouted, her eyes glaring so red that they were about to burst. When Xixia Valley's Valley Master saw that something was amiss, he immediately jumped up and shouted to stop. Ghost Faction Disciple. You've won. Immediately release the Holy Water Sect's miss and quickly leave the stage. Split up. Split up. However, Xixia Valley's Valley Master's shout was useless. He couldn't stop Peng Zhang's deranged actions. Chenhanzi tilted her body at the moment of extreme danger, and her neck arched backwards to avoid that mystic spiderweb. Unfortunately, her head was dizzy and swollen, and her mobility was greatly affected. Her limbs felt like they were being restrained by something, so they were very slow and exhausted from head to toe. Although she managed to avoid Peng Zhang's fatal strike towards her neck after her movements slowed down, she couldn't avoid her shoulder anymore. However, that mystic spider web pierced into her shoulder. At this time, Chenhanzi already couldn't feel the pain in her shoulder. She only felt that her body was very, very heavy, and her head was so heavy that she couldn't control it. Her body suddenly leaned back and fell heavily onto the stage with a bang. Senior Sister Chen. Junior Sister Hanzi. The senior and junior sisters of the Holy Water Sect all stood up and shouted angrily. Xixia Valley's Valley Master decisively flew onto the stage and grabbed Peng Zhang's moving wrist. He coldly glanced at him before saying, Ghost Faction Disciple Peng Zhang wins. Peng Zhang was unwilling to accept this. He forcefully shook off the Valley Master's hand and jumped down from the arena. When he passed by Choan, Peng Zhang's footsteps paused, and he whispered to Choan, Junior sister, how did I do? Choan revealed a pair of stern eyes from under the gray cloth scarf. She nodded with a smile and said, Senior brother, you did well this time. On the other side, several senior sisters from the Holy Water Sect had already run up the stage and carried Chenhanzi and the Silver Wolf down. Black liquid flowed out of their wounds, especially the Silver Wolf, which had been severely injured by the thousand-faced venomous spider. Its fur was constantly festering and falling to the ground in handfuls. Both of them were on the verge of death. Ghost faction, you're so despicable. You actually used this kind of despicable poison. Doya furiously stood up and pointed in the direction of the ghost faction as she cursed. Don't say despicable, little sister from the Holy Water sect. This is a competition. As long as you can defeat your opponent, it doesn't matter if you use poison or medicine. As long as you use the right method and defeat your opponent, you'll win. If she could always observe other people's profound veins in the future, then wouldn't it be equivalent to having an additional cheating device in a battle? If she opened her profound eyes in the middle of a battle, wouldn't she be able to clearly see how much profound energy was left in her opponent's body? Chapter 419. However, in less than 2 minutes, her mystic conscious quietly dissipated. Not only that, her little head also felt a slight prickling sensation. Presumably, it was because she had overused her mystic conscious. Arbor didn't dare to recklessly use her mystic conscious again. Thankfully, she was fast, and in that short amount of time, the small dust in Chenhanzi's body was more or less cleaned up. Chenhanzi didn't inhale much to begin with, and in addition to her quick treatment, Chenhanzi's face turned from ghastly pale to slightly rosy pink in no time. When everyone saw that Chenhanzi's complexion had improved, they couldn't help but heave a long sigh of relief. Lu Yun's expression also looked better, and she asked softly, "Jojo, how's Hanzi's condition?" "It's nothing serious." Arbor stuffed a detoxification pill into Chenhanzi's mouth before standing up and saying, "Carry senior sister Hanzi over there to rest. She can't use mystic energy for 2 days, so she needs to properly nurse her body." "Okay, little junior sister." "Jojo, what's wrong?" Emolien suddenly grabbed her little hand and worriedly reached out to touch her slightly pale little face. "Is it very strenuous to perform acupuncture? I can help you." "I'm fine." Arbor hastily interrupted him and squeezed his hand hard, indicating for him to shut up. She knew what he wanted to say. He wanted to use medicine to help treat senior sister Chen. Did he think that she didn't know that there were side effects when superhumans used medicine? If the medicine was overused, it could even lead to a severe coma or something. How scary was that? It didn't take much effort for her to treat senior sister Chen and the silver wolf. Her complexion was only pale because she wanted to take a look at senior sister Chen's condition out of curiosity, which led to her overuse of her mystic conscious. She could recover to her original state with a little rest. It was best not to expose the crown prince's identity as an apothecary in front of others if possible to avoid trouble. Emolien's eyes curved slightly, and she chuckled softly and nodded. "Okay, I'll listen to you. What were these two talking about again?" They couldn't understand. Everyone expressed their puzzlement with stifled hearts. Aya, little junior sister, actually knows how to perform acupuncture. His medical skills seem to be pretty good. The person who spoke was Muliangda. It was unknown when he had approached the group, but at this moment he was looking at Arbor with great interest, and a burst of laughter came from his mouth. "Don't you know that little junior sister wants to scold you the moment she catches you? Go further away." Everyone looked at him in disdain, but Muliangda was thick-skinned and didn't care at all. He continued to stand beside everyone and look at Arbor with a smile. Arbor didn't have time to care about her. She was trying to save senior sister Chen's silver wolf. The silver wolf's injuries were even more severe than senior sister Chen's. Its wounds had completely festered. The thousand-faced venomous spider's venom was very strong and corrosive. Some of the flesh around the wound was even necrotic. Arbor was using a small dagger to cut off the necrotic parts of the silver wolf. He quickly cleaned the wound, took out a pack of powder, sprinkled it on the cloth, and then firmly covered the silver wolf's wound. Soon, the silver wolf's wound from the venomous spider's stab stopped festering, and the bleeding also stopped immediately. At this time, Chen Hanzi had already faintly regained consciousness and was calling out softly, "Silver Wolf, Silver Wolf." The senior sisters from the Holy Water sect immediately rushed to her side and bent down to whisper to her, "Don't worry, junior sister Chen. The Silver Wolf is fine. Little junior sister saved it." Only then did Chen Hanzi let out a sigh of relief. Her vision darkened, and she quickly fainted again. Chapter 420. Peng Zhang sat in the Ghost Faction's seating area and watched the Holy Water sect's people busily treating the Silver Wolf from afar. A disdainful and callous smile spread across his face. A waste of effort. If the mystic abandoning powder he gave Chen Hanzi could still be cured, the Silver Wolf's bite from the thousand-faced venomous spider simply couldn't be treated. Those foolish women from the Holy Water sect still wanted to vainly save the Silver Wolf's life? He was very familiar with the thousand-faced venomous spider's poison. His thousand-faced venomous spider had just advanced to level 10 not long ago, so it was simply a piece of cake for it to bite a level 9 mystic beast to death. With the Silver Wolf dead, Chen Hanzi, a mystic cultivator who had lost her mystic beast, naturally had her strength greatly reduced. Putting aside the fact that she couldn't contract with other mystic beasts in the future, at least her mental state definitely wouldn't be able to overcome this hurdle, and her life would come to an end. Ha! Peng Zhang straightened his back and sent a look to junior sister Cho and beside him. "Watch carefully, junior sister. Senior brother will vent your anger for you, starting with this female disciple." Cho smiled without batting an eyelid. However, her face that was buried under the gray headscarf soon scrunched up. From her position, she just happened to be able to see the youth Mo Lien standing on the side, attentively watching a little girl who was squatting on the ground performing treatment. The youth's gaze didn't shift away from the little girl from beginning to end. This made her heart feel like it was being gnawed by thousands of ants. Not only was it riddled with holes, but it was also abnormally painful. "You will regret it." Cho tugged at the corner of her mouth, revealing a cruel sneer. Peng Zhang didn't understand the situation, so he lifted his robe and crossed his legs, calmly waiting for the Holy Water sect's people to start wailing. However, after a long while, after 2 consecutive matches, there wasn't any movement from the Holy Water sect's side. Instead, they all returned to their seats in their respective positions. Peng Zhang was slightly taken aback, and he looked in the direction of the Holy Water sect with a frown. He turned his head and said to a junior brother beside him, "Go over and inquire about what's going on with the Holy Water sect." The junior disciple from the Ghost faction didn't dare to go over. He felt that he might be asking for a beating if he went over. Those girls from the Holy Water sect didn't look like they were to be trifled with. He hesitated for a moment, yet he had no choice in the end. Under the threatening gaze of senior brother Peng Zhang, he could only stand up angrily and walk over dejectedly. Their ghost sect was like this. The higher-ups bullied the lower-ups, and the elders bullied the ordinary disciples. This was a common thing. Everyone relied on their own abilities to fight for the upper echelons. Those at the bottom basically had no way out. Especially junior brothers like them who had just entered the sect. In the eyes of those senior brothers who had grown up, they were just servants who could be ordered around. They had no status in the sect at all. The young disciple's heart trembled as he braced himself and walked up to a senior sister from the Holy Water sect. He used a voice that was only loud enough for him to hear and timidly asked, "May I ask this senior sister, how is the senior sister that you guys carried down just now? Who are you calling senior sister?" That female disciple suddenly stood up and raised her hand to slap this ghost faction disciple heavily on the face. "Scram! You bunch of little bastards from Hellgate, don't come and argue with us. Who knows you?" The junior disciple from Ghost Faction was about to cry. He covered one side of his face and turned to look at senior brother Peng Zhang, who was sitting in his own seat. He saw that half of his face was gloomy, and his expression was a bit frightening. "As senior sister, I also didn't want to come over." The junior disciple covered his face and retreated a step. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.